Thanksgiving had always been one of my favorite holidays. It wasn't just about the food, although that was a big part of it, but it was about the tradition. Every year, my mom would host the family dinner, and despite the chaos that sometimes came with hosting, there was always this warm feeling that filled the house. The smells, the laughter, and the clinking of silverware. It was something that made me feel safe, loved, and connected. But this year, everything felt different. I didn't even realize how much I was looking forward to this Thanksgiving until the morning of. I had been busy with work for the past few weeks, and the idea of finally being with family seemed like the perfect escape from the stress. The thought of sitting around the table, joking with my siblings, and indulging in too much food was enough to lift my spirits. As I got ready that morning, I texted my mom, asking what time I should come by. I figured I'd arrive around 4 p.m., giving me some time to get a few things done before heading over. I didn't want to be too early, but I didn't want to miss anything either. Her reply came shortly after, 4 is great. See you then. I thought nothing of it. I was excited, maybe a bit too excited. I rushed through my errands, and by the time I was finished, I checked the clock. 3:45 p.m. perfect timing. I made my way to my parents' house, replaying the previous year's holidays in my head. The memories were comforting, and I couldn't help but smile as I drove. I couldn't shake off this small, nagging feeling. Something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Maybe I was just overthinking things, or maybe it was the stress from work still hanging over me. Regardless, I tried to push it aside. This was supposed to be a fun day. When I pulled up to the house, the familiar scent of turkey and mashed potatoes wafted through the air. It was almost like a greeting, welcoming me back home. But then, as I stepped out of the car, something felt strange. There were no cars parked in front of the house. That was odd. My family always arrived early to get the food ready, and there was always a bustle of activity in the driveway. I stood there for a second, confused, and then walked toward the front door, thinking maybe I was just the first one to arrive. I rang the doorbell. No answered. I knocked a few times, a little louder this time. Still, no answered at this point. My heart was starting to race. My stomach twisted in a knot. Where was everyone? I pulled out my phone to send a quick text, but before I could type anything, it buzzed. It was a message from my mom. We thought you'd be late. My mind went blank for a moment. I reread the message twice, trying to make sense of it. What did she mean by that? Before I could figure it out, another message came through, this time from my sister. We couldn't keep waiting. My stomach dropped. It didn't make sense. They wouldn't just start without me, would they? Thanksgiving wasn't just about the meal. It was about the family being together. We always waited for everyone to arrive, no matter what. Feeling confused, I opened the door. It creaked slightly, as if it had been opened already. I stepped inside, expecting to hear the chatter of my family, but the house was eerily silent. There, on the table, was a half-empty turkey, half the side dishes, and a few scattered plates. It was clear they had already eaten. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the remnants of what should have been our meal. The thought that I had been left out, that my family had moved on without me, hit me like a ton of bricks. Why didn't they wait for me? Why didn't they even call to see if I was running late or if I was okay? I felt a deep, bitter sting, but I refused to let it show. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned on my heel and left the house without saying a word. I walked back to my car. The weight of it all began to settle in. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that they didn't wait for me, or the fact that I had to find out through a text. I got into my car, started the engine, and for a few moments, I just sat there in silence. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. I wanted to cry, but the anger wouldn't let me. I sent one last message to my mom. I guess I'll just find something else to do. I drove away, not knowing where I was going, just needing to get away from the house, from them, from everything. But as I left, I couldn't shake the question that lingered in my mind. Why didn't they wait? I didn't know what to do with myself after that. I just kept driving. There were plenty of places I could have gone, but I didn't feel like being around people. I didn't want to explain what had just happened, and I ended up at a park, parking near a quiet bench. It was chilly outside, but I needed the space to think, to breathe. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a time of togetherness, of warmth and family. But what had just happened felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't shake the feeling of being completely disregarded. It wasn't just the food I'd missed. It was the thought that my family had no issue going on without me. I sat there for a while, staring blankly ahead. A couple of people walked by, but I couldn't focus on anything else. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from my mom. I didn't pick up. Part of me wanted to hear her explanation. I wanted to know why they'd started without me, why they hadn't at least waited to check if I was on my way. But another part of me was too angry to listen. My thoughts were too jumbled. I didn't trust myself to talk about it without breaking down or saying something I'd regret. The phone buzzed again. A message from my sister this time. "Mom's really upset. Please come back." I stared at the message for a moment. Upset? After what happened? She was upset. My hands gripped the phone so tightly I thought it might crack. I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming wave of frustration. I had every right to be upset. It felt like my entire family had just moved on without me. Just like that. I thought about how many times we had sat together around that table, laughing and telling stories, making memories. And now, all of that felt emptied. I quickly typed out a reply, but before I hit send, I stopped. I didn't know if I was ready to talk to them, if I even wanted to. Instead, I just hit block on both their numbers. I didn't want to hear anything from them, not yet. It felt like the only way I could take back some control. I sat in that park for a while longer, watching as the sun dipped behind the horizon, the sky turning into hues of orange and purple. It was hard to shake the thoughts in my head. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, the empty table, the half-eaten food, the texts, and the unanswered door. Eventually, the cold started to seep in, and I decided it was time to head home. But as I started driving, I couldn't help but wonder, what happens now? Would they try to contact me again? Would they even care? Or had I just become an afterthought to them? When I finally got home, I threw my keys on the counter and collapsed onto the couch. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail from my mom. It was short and shaky, her voice filled with an apology I wasn't sure I could believe. "Please, can we talk? We didn't mean to hurt you. We just didn't think you'd be coming. Please call me when you can." I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive them. But there was a part of me that wanted to hear them out. A part of me that couldn't completely walk away. I stared at the message for what felt like hours, but I didn't reply. Instead, I lay down, the coldness from earlier wrapping around me like a blanket. I couldn't help but wonder if things would ever be the same again. The next few days were strange. The holiday passed without any more attempts from my family to reach out, at least not in a way that felt genuine. The messages had stopped coming, and the silence between us grew louder with each passing hour. I'd find myself staring at my phone, waiting for a call, but nothing came, and I began to wonder if they were just waiting for me to make the next move, to reach out first. But honestly, I wasn't sure if I could. The whole situation had shaken me more than I cared to admit, and a part of me wasn't ready to face them, let alone let them back into my life like nothing had happened. But then, exactly 3 days after Thanksgiving, I received a message from my mom. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the hurt, just a cold, brief request to meet. I stared at the message for what felt like forever. 1,000 thoughts rushed through my mind. Was she finally going to explain herself? Was this just some form of damage control? I had no idea, but I knew one thing. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face them yet. I couldn't help but think about all the years I'd put into the family dynamic, years of showing up, always doing my best to be there. And yet, they hadn't done the same for me. That hurt more than I'd like to admit. But despite all my doubts, a small part of me wanted closure. I had to know if they truly understood what they'd done, if they even cared at all. So, I agreed to meet. We set up a time to meet at a small cafe in town. I wasn't sure what to expect, but my heart was already racing as I drove there. The thought of sitting face to face with them again was nerve-wracking, and yet, I couldn't help but feel a sliver of hope. Maybe things could go back to normal. Maybe this would be the moment we could fix everything. When I arrived, I saw my mom sitting by the window, her hands folded in front of her on the table. Her expression was hard to read. Nervous, maybe? I couldn't tell. She hadn't looked this vulnerable in years. I walked over and sat down across from her. We both stared at each other in silence for a long moment. I didn't know what to say. The tension in the air was thick, and I found myself gripping the edges of my seat. Finally, she broke the silence. "I know you're upset," she said quietly, her voice shaky. "I'm sorry. I should have waited for you. But it wasn't what you think. We were worried you wouldn't come, and the food was getting cold." I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to hear her reasoning. It felt like an excuse, a way to deflect from the fact that they had made the decision to go ahead without me. I couldn't shake the thought that if they really cared, they would have waited. If they really cared, they would have at least tried to call. "I didn't want to hurt you," she continued, her voice now a little more pleading. "We just assumed you'd be too busy, or that something had come up. But I never meant for it to go like this." I looked at her, trying to read her face. But instead of feeling relief, I felt a growing sense of frustration. It didn't feel like an apology. It felt more like an explanation wrapped in guilt. I didn't want her pity. I wanted to know why she hadn't thought to check on me or make sure I was coming. It wasn't just the meal that hurt. It was the fact that I had been so easily disregarded. The silence stretched on again, and just as I was about to speak, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my sister. I opened it, expecting another apology or some kind of emotional message, but instead, I read, "Mom says you're here. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. We just want to move on." My stomach churned. Move on? Move on from what? Was this all just something that needed to be brushed aside? Forgotten? Could they really think that I could just let it go, as if nothing had happened? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, unsure of what to say. And then I looked up at my mom, who was still waiting for me to say something, anything. She looked like she was holding her breath. "I don't know what to say," I finally whispered. "I thought we meant more to each other than this." Her face fell, and she reached across the table to touch my hand. "We do. I swear we do." But we didn't know what to do. But I wasn't sure I believed her. I wasn't sure if I could trust anything she said anymore. The feeling of abandonment, of being so easily forgotten, hung between us like an invisible barrier. As my mom's hand rested on mine, I could feel the tension in her touch. It was as if she was pleading for me to understand, to forgive her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. There were so many things unsaid, so many emotions that had been buried beneath the surface for so long. And now, they were all coming to light, flooding me like a tidal wave I couldn't control. Just as I was about to speak, to finally tell her how hurt I was, the door to the cafe opened, and in walked my sister. She looked around, saw me sitting at the table with our mom, and made a beeline for us, her face hard and unreadable. She sat down without saying a word, and for a moment, the three of us just stared at each other in silence. It wasn't the reunion I'd imagined. It wasn't warm or heartfelt. It was cold, and I couldn't help but feel like a stranger in my own family. Finally, my sister broke the silence. "I don't know why this is such a big deal," she said, her voice flat. "We all know you'd be late. It wasn't anything personal." I blinked, taken aback. Was she really trying to downplay everything? Did she think I could just brush it off like she had? I felt a fire ignite in me, the anger I had been holding in for days finally surfacing. "It wasn't about being late," I said, my voice shaking. "It's about how you all just went ahead without me. You didn't even think to wait, to check if I was on my way. You just moved on. I was ignored, and that's what hurt the most." My sister's expression faltered, just for a second, before she crossed her arms and looked away. "We didn't think it was that serious. It's just dinner, after all." Just dinner? I felt the blood rush to my face. How could she say that? How could any of them think that? To me, it wasn't just dinner. It was a symbol of how little I mattered to them. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "No, this isn't just dinner, and it's not something I can just forget." My mom looked up at me, her face a mix of confusion and regret. "Please, can we just—" But I cut her off. "No, Mom. You had the chance to make it right, and you didn't. I'm tired of being an afterthought in this family. You all think that because I'm the one who's always late or the one who's busy that I don't deserve to be treated like a priority, like I matter. But that's not true. I could feel the heat in my chest as the words tumbled out. I had never been this open, this raw, with them before. And honestly, it felt good to finally let it all out, to speak my truth, even if it wasn't easy. For a moment, everything was silent. My sister avoided eye contact, and my mom sat frozen, her face pale. I didn't know what I was expecting. An apology, maybe? But nothing came. I could feel my chest tightening. The words I had spoken hung in the air like an accusation, and yet, they just sat there, unable to meet my gaze. It was as if they couldn't even comprehend the weight of what had just happened. Then, without warning, my sister's voice sliced through the tension. "You're really making this about yourself, aren't you?" I stared at her in disbelief. Was she really going to say that? After everything that had happened, after all the hurt I had poured out? What? I stammered, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and confusion. "You think I'm making this about me? You walked out on me, on our family, and now you're blaming me?" She looked at me, her expression cold, almost calculating. "I just don't get why you're blowing this out of proportion. It's just dinner, you know? We had to go on with our lives. You were probably busy anyway." Her words hit me like a slap. Just dinner? Was that really all it was to her? I thought I had been clear. This wasn't just about dinner. This was about feeling invisible, forgotten. It was about years of being treated as an afterthought and always being expected to be the one who compromised. I could feel the blood rushing to my head. My fists clenched under the table. "Are you seriously saying that to me right now?" I hissed. "That I should just get over it because you couldn't be bothered to wait for your own family?" My mom shifted in her seat, looking like she was about to speak, but the words didn't come. The silence stretched on again, and it felt like the weight of the entire conversation had fallen on me alone. Just as I was about to say something else, something sharp, something that would finally make them understand, the door of the cafe opened again, and in walked my uncle. His presence was like an interruption, a disturbance in the already tense atmosphere. He walked over to our table, giving me a quick, awkward nod before turning to my mom and sister. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his tone casual but with a hint of concern. It wasn't just his question that struck me. It was the timing. How many times had my family relied on others to step in when things got uncomfortable, when the truth was hard to face? How many times had they avoided dealing with the real issues? "I'm fine," I said, my voice a little more bitter than I intended. "Everything's just perfect." I could see my mom's face falter at my words. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but then shut it again, seemingly unsure of how to respond. Instead of waiting for my family to fix this, I stood up, pushing my chair back with a sharp scrape. "I've had enough," I said. "I've been trying to make this work for years, and you keep brushing me aside like it's nothing. But I'm done." For a moment, it seemed like no one knew how to react. My uncle looked from me to my mom, clearly unsure what was going on, and my sister's eyes narrowed. She was about to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. "You don't get to decide what's important to me anymore," I continued, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm not going to be the one who keeps trying when you all clearly don't care enough to meet me halfway. So I'm done. I'll let you figure this out without me." And with that, I turned and walked out. The cool air hit me as I stepped outside, but it was nothing compared to the chill that had settled deep inside me. I couldn't bring myself to look back. Part of me felt relieved, like I had finally freed myself from the emotional weight I'd been carrying for years. But another part of me felt empty, hollow. Was this really the end? Would my family just continue like nothing had happened? Or would they finally come to realize how much they had hurt me? The days that followed were excruciating. Every time I checked my phone, I hoped for something, a message, a call, anything. But nothing came. They had already moved on, just like they always did. I was the one left in the dust, wondering if this time, it would finally be different. And then, after a week of nothing, I received a message from my sister. It was simple, short. "I don't think you understand what you've done." The words stung, but I didn't respond. I just stared at my phone, the anger bubbling up once again. How could she think I didn't understand? She was the one who didn't get it. She was the one who had chosen her convenience over family. But something inside me knew. The next message, The next conversation would be the breaking point. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the keyboard, debating whether or not I should reply. What was the point? What could I say that would make her understand? The more I thought about it, the more I realized something. I didn't owe them any more explanations. The silence between us had become unbearable, but I knew deep down that it wasn't just my family ignoring me. It was me ignoring the fact that I had been trying so hard to fit into a picture that was never meant for me. They had their own lives, their own way of doing things, and somewhere along the way, I had stopped being a part of it. I tossed my phone on the couch and paced around my apartment, trying to shake the feeling that had been haunting me since that Thanksgiving. But no matter how much I tried to move on, the emotional scars from that day wouldn't fade. I couldn't forget how my family had acted like I didn't matter, how they had so easily dismissed me and expected me to just accept it. The days stretched on in a painful silence. I kept my distance, focusing on my work, keeping to myself. I went to a few friends' gatherings, laughed, tried to enjoy myself, but nothing filled the emptiness. Every time I thought about my family, my heart ached in a way I didn't know how to describe. Then, one day, out of nowhere, I received a phone call from my mom I almost didn't pick up, still holding on to the bitterness that had been festering. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, this time it would be different. "Hello?" I said, my voice cautious. "Hey." My mom's voice was soft, almost fragile. "Can we talk?" I didn't know what to expect. Part of me wanted to say no, to hang up and protect myself from more pain. But another part of me, the part that missed them, the part that still cared, wanted to hear her out. "Yeah, we can talk," I said, sitting down on the couch. My hands were trembling slightly, and I could hear her taking a deep breath on the other end. I don't know how to start," she said quietly, "but I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what happened on Thanksgiving. And I know I messed up. I know we messed up. We've been wrong about so many things. We pushed you away, and I'm so sorry." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't sure how to respond. After so much time, after everything I had gone through, I didn't know if I could just forgive her like that. "Mom," I struggled to find the words, but she cut me off, her voice full of emotion. "I'm not asking you to forgive us right now," she said. I wanted you to know that we realize what we've done, and we want to make it right. We're willing to do whatever it takes, but only if you want to." There it was. The apology I had been waiting for, the recognition of how badly they had hurt me. But it still felt like something was missing. It wasn't just about an apology. It was about showing me that they could change, that they could truly care. "I'm not sure if I can just forgive and forget," I replied, my voice steady. "But maybe we can figure it out. I don't want to be part of a family where I'm treated like an afterthought." "Of course," she said, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. "We'll do whatever it takes to prove it to you, one step at a time." It wasn't the perfect ending. It wasn't some dramatic reunion with hugs and happy tears. But it was a start. It was a chance for all of us to heal, to rebuild what had been broken. And as I hung up the phone, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. It wasn't the happily ever after moment I dreamed of, but it was real. It was the beginning of something new, something that had the potential to change everything. But deep down, a part of me still wasn't sure. Was this just another cycle of empty promises? Could they really change after all these years of letting me down? Or was I just setting myself up for more disappointment? I stood there in my living room, staring at the phone, wondering what my next step should be. Should I give them another chance? Open myself up to the possibility of forgiveness? Or was it time to walk away completely, to break free from the family that had hurt me so much? This wasn't an easy decision. My emotions were still raw, and I wasn't sure if I could trust them again so soon. But I also knew that I was the one who had to make this choice. I'm turning to you now. What would you do in my situation? Would you give them a second chance and try to rebuild what's been broken? Or would you walk away, put up those walls once and for all, and move on with your life without looking back?
Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Should OP give them a chance to make it right or move on for good? The choice isn't easy, but maybe, just maybe, your advice will help.
My name's Eli. I'm 28, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the other one. Not the golden child, not the favorite, just The one who was there. My younger brother Mason, he was the prize. The golden boy, star soccer player, straight-A student, all-around mom and dad's little trophy. And me? I was the guy who fixed his car when he crashed it. The one who paid off his parking tickets so our parents wouldn't ground him from Cancun. The guy who made excuses when he skipped holidays, just to keep the peace. They'd call it being a good older brother. I called it being invisible with a wallet. It was easier when I lived out of state. I moved to Chicago right after college, took a job in IT, and slowly built something decent. I had a studio apartment, a reliable income, a quiet life. But every time I visited home, usually for birthdays, weddings, or when mom missed me, I became the extra. The plus one to my own family. Conversations circled around Mason, his promotions, his new girlfriend, the charity run he'd done last fall. Even when I shared news, like my recent promotion to senior analyst, it barely earned a blink. My mom smiled, polite but distracted, already shifting topics to Mason's upcoming business trip to Dubai. My dad grunted something about tech jobs not being real work, then changed the channel to the football game. Still, I kept showing up. Not because I believed it would change, but because I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd see me, appreciate me, or at least acknowledge I was trying. I brought gifts every Christmas. Covered part of their mortgage during COVID when things got tight. Transferred Mason $500 here, $300 there, always just until Friday, and always with a thank you text that felt copy-pasted. My parents never asked where the money came from. They assumed I was doing fine. You don't have a family of your own, Mom once said. You can afford to help your brother. Then came my dad's 60th birthday. It was a backyard barbecue, nothing fancy, just family and neighbors and cheap paper plates stacked with burgers. I flew in for the weekend, spent half a Friday night helping Mom hang decorations, even paid for the cake when she realized the one she ordered was too small. Saturday rolled around, and by noon the house was packed. Mason arrived fashionably late, as always, waltzing in with a new watch and his girlfriend Tessa, who just launched a YouTube channel about minimalist living while wearing $400 sandals. My dad lit up when he saw him, hugged him, laughed like a man who hadn't smiled in weeks. Then he looked at me, nodded once, and went back to Mason like I was a neighbor who brought chips. Dinner came. Drinks flowed. People gathered around the fire pit, trading stories and teasing each other in that surface-level way families do when there's unresolved tension buried under decades of silence. That's when it happened. Someone, maybe my cousin Jake, who had a few too many drinks, asked me what I'd been working on. I told them about a new security system I helped design for a logistics firm, how it was saving them thousands monthly. The conversation barely lasted a minute before Mason jumped in, talking about some deal he closed last week. My dad clapped him on the back, grinning. "That's what I'm talking about," he said, beaming. "Now that's how you make a real difference." I laughed. Not out of joy, out of that hollow, bitter disbelief that settles in when you realize you'll never measure up. "Guess all I'm good for is paying the bills, huh?" I joked. My dad turned, drink in hand, and said it loud enough for the whole patio to hear. "You've always been a drain, Eli. Your brother's the one who actually matters." The world didn't stop spinning. Nobody dropped their drinks or gasped in horror. A few people laughed awkwardly. Mom tried to shush him, but it was too late. My stomach dropped, not because I was surprised, but because for once, he said it out loud. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell or storm off or throw a drink like in the movies. I just stood there for a second, nodding slowly, then walked inside, grabbed my suitcase, booked an early flight back to Chicago, and left. No note. No goodbyes. Just silence. The days that followed were oddly peaceful. No texts. No calls. No fake check-ins or "how are you?" from relatives trying to play neutral. I went back to work. Focused on myself. Canceled the monthly auto transfer I'd been sending Mason, just until he gets on his feet. Cut off the family plan I'd still been paying for, including the data Mason used to stream music at the gym. Logged out of the shared Netflix I'd been letting them all use. Quietly disappeared from their financial lives, one subscription at a time. 3 weeks passed. Then one night, while I was making dinner, my phone buzzed. "Mason." A text, short and annoyed. "Why did you stop sending me money?" I stared at it for a minute. Then typed, didn't want to waste it on someone who already had everything that mattered. I never hit send so fast in my life. After that, things got interesting. My mom called a few days later. I didn't answer. Then came a flurry of texts, first concerned, then guilt-trippy, then angry. "You're being immature. We're family. Mason needs you right now." I ignored them all. I wasn't being cruel, I was just done. But what I didn't expect was how fast things would unravel without me. It started subtly, little signs that the scaffolding I'd been quietly holding up for years was buckling now that I wasn't there to keep it steady. The first call came from my aunt, Linda. She never really picked sides, just floated in the background with her passive shrugs and polite nods. But this time, she wasn't so neutral. "Eli," she said, after I let her call go to voicemail and she tried again immediately. "Your mom's in tears. She says Mason's behind on rent and she and your dad are dipping into their savings to help. What's going on?" I didn't answer right away. I just sat there, staring at the wall like it might give me permission to finally say what I'd swallowed for years. "I stopped helping," I said flatly. "Guess that means it was never really Mason's money to begin with." She was quiet for a second, then sighed. "You know how they are. They don't think about the consequences until they're buried in them. Maybe that's the only way they'll learn," I replied, and hung up. After that, it got worse. Or better, depending on your perspective. Apparently, without the $500 I used to send Mason every 2 weeks, he missed his rent 2 months in a row. His credit card bills started stacking. Tessa, whose idea of hard work was editing her own thumbnails, dumped him the moment his Venmo started bouncing. She posted a tearful breakup video titled, "Leaving a Toxic Relationship, My Truth," that got more views than all her previous content combined. The irony wasn't lost on me. Then came the part no one expected. My parents' finances started crumbling. When I was younger, my dad used to brag about how real men handle money without whining. What he didn't mention was that his handling came with a lot of silent help. Like the $800 I slipped him every Christmas for house repairs. Or the loan I repaid quietly on his behalf when he defaulted after a failed business venture 5 years ago. Because, as my mom said, he doesn't need the shame. Now, without me in the background cleaning up their messes, things weren't so clean anymore. Their internet got cut off. Mom had to cancel her book club when they couldn't host anymore. Dad's truck was repossessed. Apparently, he'd been using Mason's name to open lines of credit, something no one admitted until the collectors started calling him. The part that twisted the knife? No one came to me for help. Not directly. They went to Linda, to my cousin Jake, to an old friend of mine from high school who still lived nearby. I guess they thought someone else could talk some sense into me. One of them even tried to guilt me through LinkedIn. The final straw was my mom's email. Subject line, "Come home." She kept it short, but every word felt like it had been pulled from the pages of some manual titled "How to Manipulate Without Saying You're Sorry." "Your father isn't well. Mason's doing his best. I know you're angry, but this family needs you. We've always needed you. Please think about what really matters." I read it 5 times. Then I opened a draft, typed out a reply, deleted it. Because what was I supposed to say? That I did think about what really mattered for 28 years, and apparently it had never been me? That I'd spent birthdays listening to my dad praise Mason's potential while I stood in the kitchen scraping plates? That when I graduated college, they mailed me a card and signed, but rented a boat for Mason's high school diploma. Instead, I let silence answer for me. I didn't respond. And for the first time, they finally felt what it was like to miss me. Not the me they half listened to over dinner. Not the me who paid off their debts behind closed doors. But the one they took for granted every single day. And that silence? It grew loud. Linda texted again. "You need to see this," she wrote, followed by a screenshot of a Facebook post from my mom. It was a photo of her and Dad, sitting on a porch that clearly wasn't theirs, someone else's house, probably borrowed for the picture. The caption read, "Family isn't about money. It's about love." Some people forget that when they walk away. The comments were full of sympathy. People who knew half the story, or none at all, chiming in with heart emojis and "You're such strong parents." I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I just stared at it, feeling something I couldn't name. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a kind of cold clarity. This wasn't new. It was just the first time I didn't cover it up. But what came next, that was the part no one saw coming. 2 weeks after that Facebook post, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text, a letter. Actual envelope, blue ink. My name written in that tight cursive my mom always used when she was trying to look proper. It was forwarded through my old address, the one I'd used when I first moved out for college. I opened it slowly, expecting another guilt trip or some passive-aggressive plea for forgiveness. But what I found was something stranger. Inside was a handwritten note, about a page long, with tear stains on the corner and a slight coffee ring near the bottom, like she'd spilled something while trying to figure out what to say. It wasn't an apology. Of course it wasn't. But it was something else. Eli, I know you probably won't read this. And if you do, you'll think I'm just making excuses. Maybe I am. Maybe I deserve the silence. But I need to explain something. Your dad's not doing well. He won't tell anyone, but the doctor said it's his heart. He's scared. That's why he's lashing out more. That's why he said what he did. Mason's struggling too. He's not as strong as you think. He never was. You were always the one we could count on, not because we didn't love you, but because you handled things. You were solid, reliable. Maybe that wasn't fair. Maybe we leaned on you too much. But Eli, families make mistakes. And right now, we're falling apart. We need you. Please come home. It should have cracked something open in me. Should have tugged at that old guilt I used to carry around like a second skin. But instead, I felt nothing. Just tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep, but the kind that sits deep in your bones, the kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. Still, a part of me couldn't stop wondering if it was true. About my dad. About Mason. About everything they'd hidden behind their expectations of me. So I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I looked. I didn't call. I didn't ask. I researched. I found Mason's LinkedIn. Still listed as freelance consultant. No activity in 6 months. The company he used to work for had quietly removed him from their team page. I checked public records. He'd been evicted. Twice. Then I looked up my parents' house. It was in pre-foreclosure. And suddenly, it all made sense. The letter. The post. The calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because the bank finally hung up the phone. But here's the thing. They didn't know what I'd done a week after walking out of that backyard barbecue. While they were still passing the potato salad and praising Mason's newest hustle, I'd started looking at property listings. Specifically, their neighborhood, their block. And I bought a house. Not to live in. Not to rent. Just to have. It was 2 doors down from theirs. A fixer-upper. Needed a new roof and some foundation work. I paid in cash. Set up renovations under a holding company with no traceable connection to me. Changed the mailbox. Even parked an old junker in the driveway to make it look abandoned. They never noticed. But they would soon. Because while they were scrambling to figure out why the bank was no longer patient, why the bills kept piling up, why Mason's safety net vanished, something else was quietly moving into place. And it all came to a head on a rainy Wednesday. I was working from home when the call came in. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, another one. This time from my mom. I picked up. Her voice was shaky. Desperate. Eli, she said, someone bought the house next door. It's you, isn't it? I didn't say anything. Just let the silence stretch. I saw your name on the permit, she said, voice cracking. You've been here this whole time? Watching us. Still, I said nothing. I don't understand. Why would you? Finally, I spoke. Calm. Steady. Like I'd practiced it. Because I wanted to see what happened when the drain stopped carrying the weight. She started to cry. Not sobbing. Not dramatic. Just quiet, broken sounds. Eli, we're losing everything. You already lost me. And I hung up. But it didn't stop there. Because what came next was the fallout. Mason, who hadn't worked a steady job in over a year, tried to spin the story online, claimed I was cutting the family off out of spite. Posted a now-deleted tweet calling me toxic and abusive. But I had receipts. Not literal ones. I never needed to post screenshots or bank transfers. People remembered. The cousin whose college books I bought. The uncle whose hospital bill I covered. The niece I sent a laptop to during lockdown. They reached out. Quietly. We didn't know, they said. We're sorry. I didn't need an army. I just needed them to finally see. And now, as foreclosure signs go up and the family group chat goes silent, I sit on the porch of that little renovated house down the street, sipping coffee and watching them scramble. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. Because sometimes, the only way to teach people what you're worth is to let them feel your absence. But just when I thought the story had settled, when I thought they'd learned the lesson, an envelope arrived. This one wasn't from my mom. It was from Mason. Inside? A check. Signed. And a note that simply read, "You win." But that's when I realized he still didn't get it. Because this was never about winning. And what I did next changed everything. I stared at that check for a long time. It wasn't much, barely enough to cover a month's rent in a half-decent city apartment. But the message behind it said everything. You win. As if this had all been a contest. As if finally being seen, finally being valued, finally choosing myself was some petty game I had to win. That's when it hit me. He didn't understand. None of them did. I wasn't trying to prove a point by walking away. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even trying to hurt anyone, though I won't pretend their pain didn't feel like justice sometimes. No, I was just done. Done being their emotional ATM, their unpaid fixer, their afterthought. Done being the guy they only noticed when something needed to be paid, covered, or repaired. But even in their collapse, they couldn't let go of the idea that I was the problem for finally letting go. Still, I didn't tear up the check. I didn't frame it, either. I slid it into the back of a drawer, unopened. Let it sit there like a fossil from a life I used to live. And then I did something they never expected. I moved on. I sold the house next to theirs. Didn't even visit it during the sale. I let a local investor take it, and last I heard, he planned to tear it down and build something new. A clean slate. That felt right. I didn't want to keep watching them unravel. I didn't want to keep score from the shadows. I wanted to build a life where I mattered. Not because I was useful, not because I was dependable, but because I existed. So I started saying yes to things I used to put off. I booked a trip to Iceland, just me, a camera, and no itinerary. I signed up for cooking classes because I was tired of microwave meals and lonely dinners. I even joined a local hiking group, something I used to roll my eyes at when coworkers invited me, thinking, why would I waste a Saturday morning with strangers? Turns out, strangers can become something better than family. Some of them did. A few months into this new rhythm, I met Danny. She was blunt, smart, and had this habit of calling people out when they tried to undersell themselves. She noticed I always introduced myself by my job title first. You're not your job, she told me once over coffee. Unless you want to be, but that's a pretty small box to live in. We started slow, coffee, walks, late-night calls that bled into early morning silence. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to earn someone's affection. I didn't have to fund someone else's dreams just to be invited to their table. With Danny, I just was. One evening, nearly a year after I walked away from my family, I got a call. Blocked number. I let it ring. A voicemail followed. My dad. His voice was hoarse, slower than I remembered. He sounded smaller. Eli. I don't know if this number still works. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I miss you. Your mom does too. Mason. Well, he's figuring things out. But I was wrong, son. I was wrong for a long time. And I know saying that now might not matter. But if you ever want to talk, I'll be here. I didn't cry. I didn't smile, either. I just sat there, holding the phone, listening to a man who had spent a lifetime measuring love and usefulness, finally realizing that the cost of his pride was silence. I didn't call back. Not then. I waited. A week. Then two. Then one Sunday, while Danny and I were folding laundry in our new apartment, I said, I think I might write him. She looked up. Because you want closure? No, I said. Because I'm ready. The letter I sent wasn't cruel. It wasn't cold. It wasn't dramatic. It was just honest. Dad, I got your voicemail. I've spent a long time trying to understand why things were the way they were. I'm not writing to make you feel guilty. I just want you to know that I needed to leave. I needed space to figure out who I was outside of who you all expected me to be. I'm not the drain. I never was. I'm not coming back to fix things. But I'm willing to talk. On my terms. If you can accept that, here's my number. I sent it and didn't wait by the phone. I didn't hold my breath. I didn't make room for false hope. I'd built something solid, something separate. I didn't need their apology to move forward, but if they offered it, I'd hear it. Weeks passed. Then one evening, I got a text from an unknown number. Thank you. I don't deserve this chance, but I'll take it. Dad, we met for lunch a few days later. Just him and me. No declarations. No sweeping redemption arcs. Just two people, broken in their own ways, sitting across from each other and trying to talk. He asked about work, about my life, about Danny. He even said her name like it mattered to him, not like a placeholder for some life he thought I should be living. Eventually, he said, I really messed up. I nodded. Yeah, you did. He didn't flinch. Just nodded back. I'm trying to be better, he said. Even if it's too late. It's not too late, I said. It's just not the same road anymore. That's what healing looked like for me. Not forgiveness wrapped in a bow. Not going back to the way things were. But building something new, something smaller, slower, sturdier. As for Mason, We didn't talk for a while. I heard through the grapevine that he picked up a steady job, something stable. No more startup ideas, no more get-rich schemes. Just work, real work. He reached out eventually, not with a request, just a message. I didn't understand what I was asking of you all those years. I do now. I'm sorry. I didn't respond right away. When I did, I just wrote, I believe you. Let's take it one step at a time. And we did. That was 2 years ago. Today, my life doesn't look dramatic. It's not a revenge story or a perfect redemption arc. It's just mine. I go to work. I come home. I cook with Danny. I read. I laugh. I rest. I send birthday cards to my parents. Sometimes we talk on the phone. Sometimes we don't. Mason and I grab a drink once a month. No handouts, no tension. Just brothers trying again, differently this time. The thing is, people don't always get the ending they want. But if they fight for it, if they walk away when the pain gets too loud and choose peace over obligation, they get the ending they need. And I did. Because I'm not the drain. I'm the reason the house stood as long as it did. And now, finally, I'm the reason my own life does too. I was halfway through my morning coffee when the message popped up, one of those absurdly long texts that takes up your whole screen and ends with, call me ASAP. This is important. It was from my sister, naturally. I sighed, leaned back in my chair, and glanced at the time. 8:13 a.m. on a Tuesday. Already too early for drama, but my sister Erin never operated within normal human boundaries. She was 3 years older than me, a stay-at-home mom with a taste for the extravagant and a flair for the dramatic. I'm Alex, by the way, 31 years old, software engineer, no kids, no pets, and apparently, no heart, if you ask my family. That last part's recent. I grew up in a household where boundaries weren't a thing, and family means everything was drilled into our heads like scripture. Not in the warm, Italian grandmother making pasta sense. More like, if you don't sacrifice your time, money, and sanity for us, you're a selfish traitor. Erin played that system like a professional violinist. Ever since we were kids, she got away with everything. Lying, manipulating, taking. My parents, especially my dad, bent over backwards to accommodate her. And now that she had 2 daughters of her own and a husband who did, whatever it is that Jared does, I've never gotten a straight answer. She had a whole new excuse to stay glued to everyone's wallets. But I tried to stay in my lane. I really did. I worked hard, saved smart, and kept my life low drama. Birthdays? I sent cards. Holidays? I showed up, smiled, brought wine. I didn't pick fights, I didn't gossip, and I didn't make waves. And that worked for a while, until the Sweet 16 plan dropped. Let me rewind a bit. Erin has 2 daughters, Chloe, who's turning 16, and Maddie, who's 11 and already acting like a reality TV villain. Chloe's a good kid. Quiet. Polite. Kind of shy, actually. She's the type who'd rather read than go out. More into sketchbooks than selfies. But Erin had been planning Chloe's Sweet 16 for the past year like it was the freaking Met Gala. Every time I visited, she'd go on about it. It's going to be magical, Alex, she said one night back in February while waving a Pinterest board in my face. I mean, she deserves this. She's only 16 once. The thing was, I didn't disagree. Chloe did deserve something special. She's been through a lot, mostly due to Erin and Jared's constant fighting and the financial circus that is their home life. But what Erin had in mind wasn't just special. It was borderline deranged. We're talking a rented ballroom at a local country club, a stretch limo for Chloe and 10 of her friends, a DJ from out of state, a chocolate fondue fountain, a dance floor with LED flooring, and not 1 but 2 custom dresses from a boutique in Los Angeles that specialized in pageanteer sparkle couture. I didn't even know that was a thing. She told me all of this over dinner like she was just sharing her grocery list. And guess what? She added, practically vibrating. I found this place that does these custom ice sculptures that melt into the punch. Isn't that genius? I laughed. I honestly thought she was joking. She wasn't. At the time, I nodded, made a few noises of polite disbelief, and moved on. Erin never asked for help planning. She just liked hearing herself talk. Or so I thought. Fast forward to this week. Tuesday morning. That text. I opened it, expecting more Pinterest spam. Instead, I found a breakdown of costs for the party. And not just the kind you send a vendor. This was directed at me. Labeled. Itemized. Highlighted. Limousine, $1,200. Dresses, X2 $2,000. DJ plus sound equipment, $1,500. Venue rental plus staff, $2,800. MISC, decorations, food, party favors $500. Total, $8,000. Below that, a message. This is what we still need to cover. Mom and Dad already contributed $2,000. Jared and I have put in $1,500. We need you to take care of the rest, just $8,000. It would mean the world to Chloe. This is all she talks about. Please don't let her down. I stared at the screen, blinking. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a full minute. I scrolled back up. Read it again. $8,000. Not $80. Not $800. $8,000. And just like that, something inside me shifted. It wasn't the ask itself, even though that was ludicrous. It was the expectation. There was no, would you be willing to help? No, I know this is a big ask. Just a spreadsheet and a passive-aggressive guilt trip. It wasn't a request, it was an invoice. I didn't respond immediately. I needed to think. I put my phone down, finished my coffee, and sat there in silence, staring at the wall. And then I thought about every time Erin had done this. Every time she'd pulled a favor, dumped a bill, or created chaos that someone else, usually me or our parents, had to clean up. The thousands she borrowed just for a few weeks and never paid back. The car I co-signed for that got repossessed. The time she took my emergency credit card just in case and used it to buy a weekend spa package. And every time I let it slide. I picked up my phone again and finally replied, I'm not paying for this. Within 60 seconds, the typing dots popped up, then disappeared, then popped up again. Then came the reply. Wow, seriously? After everything this family has done for you? Chloe is your niece, Alex. She worships you. You're going to break her heart over money? Unbelievable. I didn't reply. I didn't trust myself to not say something I'd regret. But I didn't expect what came next. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my dad. Just one line. Pay up or you're dead to us. That one hit harder than I expected. My parents and I weren't exactly close, but we weren't estranged. I called. I visited. I helped when I could. I thought we were okay. But apparently, $8,000 was all it took to revoke my membership in the family. I just stared at that message. Dead to us. Over a birthday party. And that's when I called the venue. The woman who answered was chipper, overly sweet, and exactly the kind of person who probably dealt with unhinged party planners daily. I gave her my name, told her I was calling about the reservation under Aaron Matthews, and said there had been a change of plans. We'll need to cancel the booking, I said calmly. Oh no, that's unfortunate. Are you sure? We have a non-refundable. Understood, I said. But you should also know, Aaron Matthews doesn't have the funds to pay the final balance. And the card on file isn't valid anymore. I'm just saving you the trouble. She went quiet for a second. May I ask your relation to Ms. Matthews? I'm her brother, I said. And I'm the one who was supposed to pay the rest. The woman made a sympathetic noise. Family. Yeah, I said. Family. I hung up, not entirely sure what I had just set in motion. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to be the family ATM anymore. Not for Aaron. Not for anyone. And that's when the real storm began. By sunrise, my phone had 27 missed calls, for voicemails, and a dozen text messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. But before I get to that, let me explain what happened next. By the time the sun cracked over the horizon, I had already disabled notifications for half of my contacts. Aaron had gone nuclear. Not just with me, but with everyone in the family. Somehow, in the space of a few hours, she'd managed to twist the story so hard it had been spun into something completely unrecognizable. According to the messages trickling in from aunts, cousins, and a few flying monkeys I hadn't seen since my college graduation, I had blindsided a child on her birthday, pulled funding at the last minute out of spite, and humiliated Chloe in front of all her friends. One even asked how I could sleep at night, knowing a 16-year-old girl cried herself to sleep because of me. What they didn't mention, the fact that I had never agreed to pay a dime, or that I hadn't even known I was expected to until the day before the event, or that my sister had tried to emotionally blackmail me into footing a bill that was nearly triple my rent. But facts don't matter when you're dealing with a mob that runs on nostalgia, obligation, and a conveniently selective memory. I poured another cup of coffee, stood in the middle of my apartment, and just listened to the silence. I hadn't turned on the TV or any music. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just stunned. A lifetime of resentment and microslides started to rise to the surface, and I could feel something tight coiling in my chest. Not rage exactly, but something colder, firmer, like steel taking shape. I opened my phone and scrolled through the missed calls again. 3 were from Aaron, 2 from my mom, 1 from Jared, who had never texted me anything before that wasn't a passive-aggressive meme about real men paying for their family. There were also voicemails. I wasn't planning to listen to them at first, but something made me tap on the first one. Aaron's voice came through loud and theatrical. "I hope you're happy, Alex. Chloe was excited to see you at the party. She even picked a special song for your dance with her. Do you know what it's like to see your child crush like that? And Dad is absolutely devastated. You're not just cutting yourself off from me. You're abandoning your whole family. But go ahead. Be alone. That's clearly what you want, right?" I deleted the voicemail halfway through. I knew her tactics. Guilt, layered with vague martyrdom, polished with a final jab. It had always worked on me when we were younger. I used to buy into the idea that I was the selfish one for setting boundaries. But now I saw it for what it was, manipulation dressed as love. Still, there was a part of me, the old reflex, the people pleaser I'd spent years trying to unlearn, that felt shaken. Not because I regretted canceling the venue, but because I knew this wasn't going to be the end of it. Erin didn't just take a hit and move on. She doubled down. She escalated. I didn't have to wait long. Later that morning, I got a call from Mom. Not a text, not a voicemail, a full-on phone call. And despite everything in me screaming to let it ring out, I answered. "Hi, Mom. You're breaking your father's heart," she said. No hello. No pleasantries. I rubbed my eyes. "Morning to you, too. This isn't about money, Alex. This is about family, about showing up for each other. Your niece has been dreaming about this for months." "She has," I said, walking over to my window and staring out. "Or has Erin been dreaming about it?" There was a pause. "You always do this," Mom snapped. "You always assume the worst about your sister. Maybe if you were around more often." "I'm around," I said evenly. "I've helped pay your property taxes. I fixed your car last year. I covered Erin's credit card debt when she claimed Jared lost his job and they were behind on rent. You remember that?" More silence. "That wasn't help," she finally said. "That was obligation. You didn't even come in the house. You dropped off the check like it was a business transaction. Because that's what it was," I wanted to say. But I didn't. Instead, I just stared out at the neighbor's cat as it climbed over the fence, free and utterly unbothered by family dysfunction. "I'm not paying $8,000 for a party, Mom. That's insane." "Well, then I hope you're ready to lose your family over a party," she said, and hung up. I stood there for a full minute, phone still pressed to my ear. That was the moment the tension stopped building in me like steam and started to congeal into something different. I wasn't boiling anymore. I was freezing. This wasn't just about the party. It never had been. This was about a pattern, a history, a role I had always been expected to play, the ATM with a smile, the brother who never says no, the son who stays quiet while everyone else screams over him. I sat down and started writing a list, just for myself. Every time Erin had used me, every time I'd bailed her out, every time she'd called me selfish for not immediately saying yes to her demands. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because I needed to remind myself that this wasn't a one-off. This was a final straw in a haystack of them. When I finished the list, it was nearly 2 pages long. Later that afternoon, I found myself scrolling social media, Chloe's page, specifically. I wasn't spying. I just wanted to see if maybe, just maybe, she was okay with a small, simple birthday. Maybe she wasn't the one behind all this madness. And that's when I saw the post. It was a boomerang of her trying on one of the dresses. A full sequined, strapless gown with a price tag that made my wallet wince. But what caught my attention wasn't the dress. It was the caption. "Mom says Uncle Alex is paying for the whole party. I feel like a princess 2 hearts crown #sweet 16 #spoiled." My jaw tightened. She hadn't meant it maliciously. She was just excited. But the damage was done. Erin told her I was paying for the entire thing. Without ever asking me. Without even informing me. She planned the entire event around my money and got her daughter hyped up on the lie. And now I was the villain for pulling the plug? It was like planning someone else's wedding, inviting everyone, ordering the cake, and then casually informing the groom a week before that he owed you $25,000. And when he says no, calling him a monster. But even that wasn't the final push. That came at 7:41 p.m. I had just started making dinner when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I checked the peephole, my stomach dropped. Jared. He was standing there in a hoodie, arms crossed, jaw tight. Like he was trying to look casual, but couldn't hide the tension. I opened the door slowly. "Hey," I said cautiously. "We need to talk," he said, brushing past me into the apartment. "Nope," I said, turning around. "We really don't." He didn't sit down, just stood in the middle of the room like a linebacker. "You embarrassed my wife," he said. "You humiliated our daughter. You couldn't even call us first." I stared at him. "Your wife tried to trick me into paying $8,000 for a party I didn't agree to. She told Chloe I was footing the bill. She sent me a literal invoice and then guilt-tripped me when I said no. And I'm the one who's wrong here." "She's your sister," he snapped. "And I'm not her wallet." I shot back. He took a step forward, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if he was going to swing or shout. Instead, he took a deep breath, clenched his fists, and said something that made the hair on my neck stand up. "She's not going to let this go. You think this ends with the party? You made her look bad in front of everyone. You're going to regret this." I stared at him, suddenly calm. "I already do," I said, and opened the door. He didn't move. I said, "Get out." Eventually, he left, but not before throwing one final parting shot over his shoulder. "Don't bother showing up to Christmas. You're not welcome." The door clicked shut behind him, and I stood there in the quiet for a while, heart pounding. My dinner was cold. My phone was buzzing again, and I could feel the walls closing in. But the thing was, I wasn't cornered. They thought I was just going to roll over. They had no idea what I had planned next. But we'll get to that. First, let me tell you what happened the next morning when Aaron found out what else I'd done. The next morning started with a knock. Not a call, not a text. A knock. Firm, rhythmic, confident. The kind of knock that doesn't ask permission, it assumes it. I had barely finished brushing my teeth and was still in boxers and an old college hoodie when I opened the door and saw her. Erin. She stood there on my doormat like she owned the building, her oversized sunglasses perched atop her head, holding a bright pink binder against her chest like it was a holy text. Behind her, parked half on the curb, was her white SUV with a magnetic decal on the side. Chloe's Sweet 16, RSVP, ASAP. The date still read 2 days away. "You and I," she said with a tight-lipped smile, "are going to have a little talk." I didn't move. I just leaned one arm against the doorframe and met her eyes. "You drove all the way here to say something you couldn't text?" "No," she said, pushing past me like a human battering ram. "I drove all the way here to fix your mistake, before you completely ruin your niece's life." I shut the door behind her slowly. I didn't know I had that kind of power. She turned to face me in the living room, flipping open the binder. It was full of notes, laminated spreadsheets, printed out contracts, and color-coded tabs. She had planned this party like a military invasion. "First of all," she began, "you're going to call the venue and uncancel. I don't know what you told them, but they froze the booking, and now they're threatening to open it to someone else unless we confirm payment by noon tomorrow." I crossed my arms. "Good." She blinked. "Excuse me." I said, "Good. Let them give it to someone else. You shouldn't be throwing a wedding-sized party for a 16-year-old when you're already drowning in debt." Her mouth tightened into a flat line. "This is not about the money." "Oh, really?" I gestured to the binder. Could have fooled me. "This is about family, Alex," she said, her voice rising. "This is about you being there for your niece, for me, like you've promised every time you say, 'You've got my support.' Remember that." I laughed bitterly. "Support doesn't mean a blank check." "It does in this family," she snapped. And there it was. The raw, ugly truth. She believed it. Deep down, in her bones, Erin believed that because we were related, I owed her. That her wants were my debts. That her messes were my duty to clean. "I'm not your bank," I said quietly. "And I'm not responsible for your fantasy." She slammed the binder shut and tossed it onto my coffee table. "You think you're so noble. Living in your little bachelor apartment. No kids, no responsibilities. No chaos," I corrected. "While I'm out here trying to raise 2 girls in a world that judges them for everything. Do you even know how hard Chloe works? How often she's cried because she feels invisible? And now, finally, she has something that makes her feel special, and you want to rip it away because what? Your ego's bruised." "No, Erin. I want to not be lied to. I want to not be expected to bail you out without being asked. I want to stop being the villain every time I say no. She stared at me. Her face was flushed, jaw tight. Then she said something that made my stomach twist. I told Chloe you were paying for it because I thought you would. Because you always have. My hands dropped to my sides. So you lied to her. I believed it, she shouted. That's not a lie, that's faith. I turned away, stunned. She didn't get it. She truly didn't get it. But the worst wasn't over yet. I can't believe you're doing this, she muttered. After everything. After what we did for you last year when you got laid off. I turned slowly. What? Oh, please don't act like you forgot. Dad pulled strings to get you that freelance job with his friend. Jared drove you to that stupid tech convention when your car wouldn't start. We helped you. My jaw clenched. I paid Dad's friend for that job. And I reimbursed Jared for the gas. Don't rewrite history, Aaron. You're twisting everything, she shrieked. You've always been selfish. You hide it behind your little, I just need space act, but really? You think you're better than all of us. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I saw her not as my sister, but as someone who had built an entire world in which I existed solely to serve her needs. And any deviation from that was betrayal. She stepped closer. Well, guess what? You crossed a line, Alex. You want to talk betrayal? I'll show you betrayal. And then, she pulled out her phone, scrolled for a second, and turned it toward me. It was a screenshot of a group chat. Not just any group chat, the family group chat. The one I had been mysteriously left out of months ago after a small argument about Christmas plans. I'd shrugged it off at the time, assuming it had just gone dead. Apparently not. There were messages from Mom, Dad, Aaron, Uncle Stephen, Aunt Caroline, and even a few of the cousins. Dozens of them. All about me. He thinks he's better than us because he makes a little tech money. Remember when he said he doesn't believe in buying gifts for kids over 10? Selfish. He's always been distant. Cold. Like a stranger. We should have cut him off years ago. At least Chloe will know who really loves her. And the worst. He needs a taste of his own medicine. I felt my breath hitch. All that time. Every holiday dinner where I smiled and brought wine. Every visit where I sat quietly while they mocked each other, thinking I was doing the right thing by staying neutral. Every dollar I slipped into a parent's hand to cover the difference. Every time I told myself, it's not that bad. They love you. They're just stressed. And they were talking about me like I was a disease. I looked up at Aaron. You've been talking about me behind my back. All of you. She didn't look guilty. Not even ashamed. She just crossed her arms. We vent. That's what families do. No. I said, the numbness turning sharp. That's what you do. She shrugged. Well, if you'd actually shown up once in a while, maybe we wouldn't need to vent. I nodded slowly, the weight of it all settling in. That was the betrayal. Not the party. Not the money. Not even the guilt tripping. It was that I had spent years believing I was part of a family that just needed patience. Just needed time and understanding. But really? I was the scapegoat. The fallback. The emotional punching bag. Aaron grabbed her binder and turned to go, but paused at the door. You think this is over? You think you can humiliate me, sabotage Chloe's birthday, and just walk away? This is just getting started. Then she left. I stood there in the silence again, just like the morning before. But this time, something had changed. The last thread had snapped. This wasn't just about canceling a venue anymore. It wasn't about $8,000. This was about reclaiming the narrative. About finally telling the truth. To them, to Chloe, to myself. And the next step? Oh, it was coming. That night, I didn't eat. I tried. I made a half-hearted attempt at boiling some pasta, even dumped some store-bought sauce in a pan, but my stomach turned before I could even lift the fork. The words from that group chat had wrapped themselves around my ribs like barbed wire. I couldn't stop seeing them, hearing them. He thinks he's better than us. Selfish. Cold. A stranger. I'd read them a dozen times already, but each one still landed like a punch to the gut. I kept wondering how long it had been going on. Had they always felt this way? Was there some secret turning point where I stopped being Alex, the dependable little brother, and became this distant, ungrateful black sheep in their eyes? Or had I just never really belonged in the first place? I sat in the dark for a while, no TV, no music, just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old building settling. My phone buzzed a few times. I didn't look. At that point, I didn't need to. I knew it wasn't anyone asking how I was. It was probably just more noise. More guilt. More pressure to be the person they imagined I was supposed to be. And then, around 9:20 p.m., came another knock. I froze. For a moment, I thought Erin had come back. I even grabbed my phone and checked the peephole like I was expecting a jump scare. But it wasn't her. It was Chloe. Alone. She stood there on my doorstep in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, her hair tied back in a lazy ponytail, eyes red and puffy. She had a little duffel bag slung over her shoulder. My heart sank. "Hey," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. She walked in slowly, not looking around, not saying anything at first. She sat on the edge of the couch, dropped the duffel bag on the floor, and just stared at her hands for a long time. "I didn't know where else to go," she said finally. I sat down across from her, keeping some space. "You okay?" She gave a broken laugh. "Do I look okay?" "Fair enough." She rubbed at her eyes with her sleeves and let out a shaky breath. "Mom lost it. Like, completely. She was screaming at me all night. First about the party. Then about how I embarrassed her by talking about the dresses on Instagram. Then about how I destroyed the illusion because I came crying down the stairs when she told me you weren't paying for anything. She kept saying it was all my fault, that you canceled everything because I got ahead of myself. I felt something twist inside me. That's not true. She told you I was paying. You didn't do anything wrong. She said you promised. That it was a gift." I shook my head. "I didn't promise anything. I didn't even know about the costs until 2 days ago." Chloe sniffed. "I know. I figured that out today. I overheard her on the phone with Grandpa, saying she needed to spin this right so the family wouldn't turn on her." I said nothing. Then, softly, Chloe added, "Uncle Alex, am I really that much of a burden?" My chest tightened. "No. God, no. I didn't want a huge party," she said. "I just wanted to hang out with some friends. Maybe a sleepover or something. But Mom kept saying, this is your big moment. She said people were watching, that we had to look like we had everything together. That's not your fault." She looked up at me then, and what I saw in her eyes was more than sadness. It was guilt, confusion, a kid caught in the middle of a storm she didn't start and couldn't escape from. "I just wanted you to be there," she said. "Even if it was just to eat cake and laugh at the stupid DJ. And that was it." That's when something in me cracked. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in grief. I had been so focused on Erin's manipulations, on my parents' betrayal, that I hadn't realized who else was collateral damage in all of this. Chloe didn't ask to be part of this war. She was just the flag they waved around while they fired shots at each other. She fell asleep on the couch around 10:30, curled into a little ball under a blanket I kept for guests. I sat nearby for a while, just watching her breathe. I didn't want to wake her. Didn't want to tell her that the world she thought she knew was full of cracks. She'd find out soon enough. She already was. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept waking up and checking on her, thinking about all the birthdays I'd missed because I was working, all the times I'd told myself, you don't need to go. You don't really fit in anyway. I'd always assumed Chloe was happy in that chaotic little ecosystem Erin created. But maybe she'd just learned to fake it better than I had. By morning, I had made a decision. Not a dramatic one. Not a Hollywood-style vengeance monologue. Just a quiet choice. I was going to step away. Not because I was giving up, but because I finally understood I wasn't wanted in that family. I was useful. And there's a difference. I started small. I called the venue one last time and told them the reservation wouldn't be reinstated. I made it clear that under no circumstances should anyone claim to speak for me or use my name for payments. Then I called the dress boutique. Same thing. I emailed the DJ, too, just to be safe. I wanted my name completely removed from every part of the party plan. No more leverage. Then I opened a private browser window and started looking into something I hadn't thought about in a while. Jobs in other cities. New York, Portland, Denver, even Toronto, for the hell of it. I didn't know if I'd move. But the idea of starting fresh somewhere, of building a life where I wasn't defined by old expectations and toxic loyalty, it felt necessary. By noon, Chloe was awake. I made her pancakes, bad ones, the kind that burn in the middle and stay gooey at the edges. But she ate them with a small smile and said they were better than Mom's gluten-free monstrosities, which made us both laugh harder than we should have. Then she said something that stuck with me. You know what the worst part is? What? She's not even mad about the money. She's mad because she thinks she lost the spotlight. I nodded. Yeah, that sounds like her. Chloe looked down at her plate. I don't want to go back. Not yet. You don't have to, I said. You can stay here as long as you need. She gave me a grateful look. But behind her eyes, I could see it. The same emotion that had haunted me for years. That dull ache of not knowing where you fit. Of wondering if you're too much or not enough for the people who raised you. Later that afternoon, I got a call from my mom. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail I didn't bother listening to. Then came a text from my dad. You've made your point. Enough is enough. Send Chloe home. No, please. No, how are you? Just a command. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat down with Chloe and asked her something that surprised even me. Do you want to do something different for your birthday? She looked up. Like what? I don't know. Road trip? Movie marathon? Build a blanket fort and eat too much pizza? She blinked, then smiled. Can we go to the aquarium? The one with the tunnel where the sharks swim over you? Yeah, I like it there. It's quiet. You got it. We spent the next hour planning a simple, quiet birthday. Just the two of us. No glitter, no DJ, no expectations. Just a reminder that sometimes the best moments don't need to be broadcasted to be real. And yet, even as I tried to build something good out of the wreckage, I knew it couldn't last. Erin wouldn't just let this slide. She'd twist it, escalate it, weaponize it. I could already feel the next betrayal coming. And I was right. Because that night, at 7:03 p.m., my building manager called. He said a woman claiming to be my sister and co-tenant had shown up with two moving guys and tried to get access to my apartment, saying I'd gone missing and she needed to secure my documents for legal reasons. She had even printed a fake lease agreement. With my name. And hers. He didn't let her in. Thankfully. But he warned me that she'd been loud. Caused a scene. Said she'd be back, with the police if needed. And that's when I knew. Erin wasn't just angry. She was declaring war. And I hadn't even opened my final weapon yet. The next morning, I woke up with clarity. Not joy exactly. Not peace. But something steadier than either. A quiet resolve that hummed beneath my skin like an engine finally running on its own terms. I didn't feel the usual pull to check my phone for damage control. I didn't wonder what Erin was saying about me to the rest of the family. I didn't even open the group texts still trickling in from cousins and uncles trying to play mediator. Something inside me had shifted. And for once, it stayed shifted. Chloe was still asleep on the couch, tangled in the blanket, one leg hanging off the edge like a sleepy cat. The kid had barely said a word the night before after we got the call from my building manager. She just gave me a look, a mixture of fear, exhaustion, and disbelief that said this is what she does, without ever having to say it. I let her sleep. She needed it. Hell, so did I. But I couldn't sit still. Not anymore. I showered, threw on real clothes, button-up shirt, jeans, jacket, and stepped out into the cold morning air with a single goal: start building something that was mine. No strings. No family. No fake loyalty. Just mine. First stop, a lawyer. I didn't know any personally, but I knew enough to know that if Erin was trying to fake documents and claim tenant rights to my apartment, I had to get ahead of it. I found a local firm, walked in without an appointment, and 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from a man named Daniel who had the kind of calm, meticulous energy I immediately trusted. He didn't blink when I explained the situation. Just took notes, asked sharp questions, and outlined what we needed to do. File a protective notice with my building manager, get a notarized statement that I was the sole tenant, and, if needed, file a cease and desist against Erin. You'd be surprised how often things like this happen between siblings, he said as he clicked through forms on his screen. Entitlement has no blood type. By noon, I had copies of every legal document with my name clearly listed as the sole resident. I signed an affidavit denying any shared lease with Erin, and Daniel sent a formal letter to my landlord instructing them not to let anyone into my unit under any circumstance without my direct, written approval. I felt lighter walking out of that office. Not because the problem was gone. It wasn't. But because I was no longer bracing for impact. I was preparing to push back. Next, I walked to a nearby cafe and pulled out my laptop. And that's when I did something I'd been avoiding for years. I launched my portfolio website. I'd built pieces of it in the past, mock-ups, project pages, half-written bios, but I never published it. I'd always had a steady job, decent enough freelance offers, and never really needed to put myself out there. But deep down, I think I was scared. Not of failure, but of being seen. Erin had always made me feel like I was small. selfish, cold, invisible unless I was needed. She painted me as this stoic figure with no ambition, no warmth, no real presence in the family. And for a long time, I believed it. But sitting there in that cafe, with legal documents in my backpack and my niece asleep in my apartment because she didn't feel safe at home, I realized that being invisible had been my defense. And it was time to step out of it. The site went live just after 2 p.m. By 5 p.m., I had 4 emails in my inbox from small tech startups looking for freelance help. One of them, a media automation company based out of Chicago, offered a 6-week contract on the spot after I sent a quick reply and portfolio link. The rate? More than double what I was making at my day job. Fully remote. Flexible hours. High-profile clients. It was the kind of opportunity one would have second-guessed a week ago. Now, I said yes before they finished the sentence. Over the next few days, things picked up fast. Chloe stayed with me, quietly attending her online classes from my kitchen table and watching documentaries on her tablet at night. We built a weird little routine. I worked during the day. She made dinner sometimes. We talked. Not a lot. Not about anything heavy, but enough. The birthday came and went without the usual fanfare. No DJ. No sequin dress. No limo. We went to the aquarium like she asked, walked slowly through the tunnels while stingrays and reef sharks floated overhead, and then sat on a bench outside, eating fish tacos from a food truck in the cold. Best birthday ever, she said, chewing with her mouth full. I raised an eyebrow. Because of the tacos? Because it didn't feel like a performance. She didn't have to say more. I got it. That night, we got back to the apartment and found a small box sitting at my front door. No note. Just the box. Inside was one of the dresses from Aaron's Sweet 16 plan, the one from the Los Angeles boutique. Tag still on. Retail price, $1,200. Chloe picked it up gently, like it might shatter. Why would she send this? She asked, her voice cautious. I didn't have a good answer. Maybe guilt. Maybe as bait. Maybe to keep up appearances. But Chloe didn't try it on. She didn't even look at it for more than a minute. She folded it back into the box, taped it shut, and set it beside the trash. That told me everything. Meanwhile, back in the world of our lovely family, chaos was brewing. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the voicemail. But word was traveling. A cousin I hadn't heard from in months messaged me out of the blue. Hey, heard you and Aaron had a falling out. Just want you to know I'm on your side. I didn't respond. Not out of spite. I just didn't need a side anymore. I wasn't playing that game. A few days later, another message came in from Aunt Caroline. Your mom's been telling people you're having a mental break. That you're lashing out for attention. If you want me to set the record straight, let me know. That one, I replied to. Thanks. But I'm fine. Just choosing peace. And peace, for the first time in years, was exactly what I had. My days were full. Between the new freelance work, a growing interest in photography I'd long ignored, and the sheer freedom of not having to constantly manage someone else's expectations, I started to feel something I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. Control. Not control over others. Not manipulation. Just control over myself. Where I went. What I did. Who I allowed in. Who I didn't. I went back to therapy, too. Reached out to an old counselor I hadn't seen since college. We had long conversations about boundaries, emotional blackmail, and why I kept showing up to get punched in the soul over and over by people who claimed to love me. And slowly, I began stitching together a new version of myself. One that didn't exist solely in relation to someone else's dysfunction. But even as my life began to bloom, I knew the quiet wouldn't last. Because Erin wasn't done. She'd gone unchallenged for decades. Her identity depended on being the center of gravity. She couldn't just let me drift out of orbit. Sure enough, it started with small things. She sent screenshots of my LinkedIn profile to the family group chat, claiming I was faking success to make her look bad. She messaged Chloe from multiple fake accounts, pretending to be concerned friends who warned her that I was isolating her on purpose and feeding her lies. And then, finally, she went for the throat. She filed a formal CPS report, claiming I had kidnapped Chloe and was holding her in an unstable environment. I found out when 2 agents showed up at my door with polite but firm questions. I didn't panic. I had receipts. Chloe had chosen to stay with me. She was a minor, yes, but I hadn't prevented her from contacting her parents. She'd been going to school, eating well. I had legal counsel. Everything was documented. Chloe backed it up, calmly and clearly. The agents left with quiet apologies. No follow-up required. But in that moment, as the door closed behind them, I realized something chilling. Aaron was willing to burn the whole house down just to keep control of the ashes. And yet, as I stood there in the doorway, watching the world go on like nothing had happened, I felt no fear. I had something stronger than fear. I had truth. I had proof. I had freedom. And most of all, I had a plan. Because if Aaron thought she could weaponize lies, she hadn't seen what I could do with the truth. But I'll tell you about that in a moment. First, let me take you to the night of the community fundraiser, when Aaron's perfect image finally began to crack in public. The fundraiser was hosted at the local community center, a modest brick building with flickering overhead lights and coffee-stained carpets that always smelled faintly like burnt popcorn and dust. The kind of place that felt like it hadn't changed since the 80s and probably never would. It was put together by a neighborhood nonprofit that supported teen literacy programs, and Chloe's school was one of the beneficiaries. She asked me to come with her. I almost said no. It had only been a week since the CPS scare. I was still bracing for another ambush. But Chloe looked at me with a kind of quiet hope I hadn't seen in a while. Like she was testing the waters of normal again, of living without looking over her shoulder. So I went. And that's where everything began to turn. At first, it was just the two of us sitting in the back row of the folding chair circle, sipping watery lemonade and avoiding the table of PTA moms swarming around a raffle ticket basket. I noticed a few side eyes, some adults from Chloe's school, I assumed. Maybe a neighbor or two who'd heard the gossip. But I didn't care. The old version of me, the one who kept his head down and made himself small to avoid conflict, would have ducked out early. But this version of me stayed. Then something strange happened. A woman in a beige turtleneck and a long, pebbled gold chain approached me during the break between speakers. She looked like someone's overachieving aunt, clipboard, badge, purse that probably doubled as a filing cabinet. You're Alex, right? Chloe's uncle. I tensed for a second. Yeah. I'm Karen. No jokes, please, she added with a wink. I'm on the board here. Chloe's one of our top readers, and she's mentioned you a few times. You're the software engineer. I am, I said slowly. Freelance. She brightened. Even better. I was wondering if you'd ever consider mentoring some of our teens. We've been trying to launch a digital literacy initiative, basic coding, resume building, that kind of thing. But we haven't found the right person. You seem like someone who gets it. I blinked. Oh wow? Yeah. I mean, I'd love to help. She gave me a card. Send me an email. We'll talk. And thank you, seriously. Chloe's blossomed this semester. She's sharper, calmer. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I looked over at Chloe, who was stuffing cookies into a napkin while pretending not to notice that a boy nearby was trying to impress her with a yo-yo trick. Thanks, I said, and meant it. That conversation opened a door I didn't even know existed. Over the next week, Karen and I emailed back and forth. She introduced me to the center's director. I pitched them an idea for a beginner-friendly tech workshop. They loved it. I wasn't just going to teach. I was going to build something. A program with my name on it. Something that wasn't just a job or a side gig. Something that mattered. They offered a small grant to develop a curriculum. Enough to cover my time while I built the first few modules. More offers started trickling in through my freelance portfolio too. Some even referred by parents at the fundraiser. Word was spreading. Quietly. Organically. But it was spreading. Meanwhile, Aaron's world was starting to fray. I didn't even have to go digging for it. My inbox turned into a confessional booth. Cousin Danielle messaged. Hey, I don't know what's going on with Aaron, but she tried to get me to write a Facebook post backing up her version of the Sweet 16 story. Something about you sabotaging a child's milestone. I refused. Just thought you should know. Then Aunt Caroline again. Aaron told Grandma you called her abusive. Now Grandma's threatening to write you out of the will, but also keeps forgetting who she's mad at, so good luck. But the real twist came when I got an anonymous email with the subject line. You're not the only one she's scammed. Inside was a series of screenshots. Texts between Aaron and a woman named Julia, an old friend from high school, apparently. The messages painted a very familiar picture. Aaron borrowing money with big promises, ghosting when payback time came, using Chloe as an emotional pawn. Can you just send $200 this week? Chloe's meds are so expensive. You're a mom, you get it. If you lend me $500, I swear I'll pay you back after the party. My brother's covering most of it anyway. You don't want to make Chloe feel abandoned, do you? Each message was laced with manipulation, half-truths, and straight-up lies. The email ended with a simple note. She ruined our friendship. I hope you find a way to stop her. That was when it hit me. Erin hadn't just turned my family against me. She'd built a whole career out of this. Manipulating, guilt-tripping, faking victimhood, and hiding behind Chloe like a human shield. I sat there for an hour, rereading every screenshot, every plea for money disguised as maternal desperation. And then I opened a document on my laptop and started compiling everything. A timeline, a list of people she had used, dates, numbers, screenshots, names, not to weaponize, not yet, but to understand the pattern. Because now I saw the whole picture. Erin wasn't just difficult. She was systematic. She had perfected the art of emotional extortion. She knew exactly how to spin a narrative, position herself as the struggling mother, and paint anyone who said no as cruel, selfish, or mentally unstable. She did it with Mom and Dad, with me, with Julia, with half the people in that group chat, I'd bet. And like any system that depends on lies, it could be unraveled. Chloe and I started spending more time at the community center. She joined a reading circle for kids her age. I spent my afternoons working with 2 volunteers to build the curriculum for my digital literacy course. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't viral. But it was real. One evening, after a workshop, I was packing up when Karen stopped me again. You know, she said, we've got an award ceremony coming up in a few weeks. Local leaders, community advocates, that kind of thing. We're short one speaker, and I was wondering if you'd be willing. I blinked. Me? She smiled. You've made an impact. More than you know. That night, I walked home with Chloe under a sky full of stars. She was quiet for a while, then asked, are we going to be okay? And I realized she didn't mean just her and me. She meant her too. By herself. Away from her mom. I didn't answer with a yes or a no. I just said, we're going to build something better. And I meant it. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. And Erin? She had no idea that I was documenting everything. No idea that Julia had come forward. No idea that the fundraiser's board had asked me to speak at an event she was planning to attend. She was still clinging to the story she had built. But her empire of guilt was made of sand. And I was learning how to wash it away, one truth at a time. But before the fundraiser arrived, I made one more phone call. To someone I hadn't spoken to in months. My father. And what he said on that call changed everything. Calling my father wasn't something I did lightly. Even after everything, there was still that old muscle memory, the urge to believe that beneath his harsh words, behind the disappointment and the ultimatums, he was still Dad. That maybe if I explained things clearly enough, reasonably enough, he'd finally see Erin the way I did. Not as the golden daughter, not as the struggling single mom, but as the manipulative tornado she really was. I didn't expect an apology. I just wanted acknowledgement. A crack in the facade. He answered on the 4th ring. Alex. There was no warmth. No hesitation. Just my name, flat and clipped. Hey. I said, keeping my voice neutral. Got a minute? Depends. Is this another tantrum? I almost hung up right there. But instead, I closed my eyes, let the heat rise and fall, and kept going. I need to talk to you. Not about the party. Not about Chloe. About Erin. A pause. Then a heavy sigh. You don't give up, do you? I'm not asking you to take sides. I just want you to listen. That word, listen, must have poked something in him. Because he said, I'm listening. So I told him everything. Slowly. Carefully. Not dramatized. Not exaggerated. I laid out the timeline. The $8,000 expectation. The fake lease agreement. The CPS call. The screenshots from Julia. Chloe staying with me. Erin's repeated lies. I even told him about the fundraiser. How I'd been asked to speak. How Chloe had found some peace outside of her mother's orbit. When I finished, the line was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You're serious? Yes. You have proof. I've got an entire folder of it. Another pause. Then, quietly, almost like he was confessing something. I think. Part of me always knew she was like this. Your sister. But your mom, she never wanted to see it. And I guess I stopped trying to convince her. I sat up straighter. Then you knew. I knew she could twist things, he said slowly. But I didn't realize how far it had gone. She used you, I said. Used all of us. He let out a breath. Send me the folder. That was all he said. No apology. No, I'm proud of you. Just send me the folder. But weirdly, that was enough. Because for the first time, he believed me. And now, with him no longer blindly defending Aaron, the stage was set. The fundraiser was scheduled for a Friday night 2 weeks later, held in a modest auditorium downtown with folding chairs, mismatched tablecloths, and trays of store-bought cookies that had been transferred to ceramic plates in a desperate attempt to look elevated. Chloe and I arrived early. She was wearing a soft blue sweater and jeans, her hair in a braid. I'd never seen her look so relaxed in public. Karen met us at the entrance, handed me the program, and said with a conspiratorial smile, "You're closing the night." Seriously? You've got the best story. Leave him with something memorable. I had written the speech the night before. Not polished, not rehearsed, just honest. About mentorship, second chances, breaking cycles. No names, no direct attacks, but every word had purpose. What I didn't expect, what I couldn't have planned, was that Erin would show up. She came in halfway through the event, heels clicking on the linoleum, face pinched with faux curiosity. She wore a cream blouse and a necklace I recognized as one she'd guilt my mom into buying last Christmas. Trailing behind her was Jared, looking like a man permanently on the edge of a panic attack. They weren't on the invite list, but they knew I'd be speaking. They wanted to see what I'd say. I didn't acknowledge her when she walked in. Neither did Chloe. We just watched as she scanned the room, saw us up front, and made her way to a seat near the back. Close enough to hear, far enough to look detached. Classic Erin. The event went smoothly. A few local teachers spoke. One of the board members gave a short talk about the impact of the program. Then, finally, Karen took the stage again. Our final speaker tonight is someone many of you may already know. He's not just a mentor in our digital literacy program. He's also become a safe haven for one of our brightest students. Please welcome Alex Matthews. The applause was polite. A few claps here and there. But the second I stepped up to the podium, the room stilled. I didn't speak right away. I let the silence settle. Then I said, I used to think being part of a family meant always saying yes. No matter what. No matter the cost. A few people glanced at each other. Erin shifted in her chair. I thought loyalty meant silence. That love was about absorbing damage, quietly, privately, so the people around you could keep looking good in public. More shifting. Jared looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. But what I've learned this year, I continued, is that love isn't quiet. Love doesn't ask you to disappear. It asks you to show up. It doesn't demand obedience. It invites truth. I paused, scanned the room, and let my gaze drift past Erin like she wasn't even there. I'm here because someone I care about was being taught that love meant sacrifice. That affection had to be earned. That gifts came with strings. And I couldn't let that lie live any longer. Now there was no movement, just stillness. So I stepped away from what I was taught love was and started building something better, something real. I ended the speech with a small story about Chloe, how she once told me that her best birthday was the one without a party, the one with tacos and sharks and silence. And when I stepped down, the applause was thunderous. Not because I was some brilliant orator, but because people recognized it. They'd seen it before. In their families, their marriages, their friendships. Karen came over, eyes glassy. That was incredible. Chloe hugged me tight. You didn't even name her. That made it hit harder. And Erin? She left before the applause ended. But I wasn't done. The next day, I published the full speech on my website. Then I created a private Google Drive folder labeled Erin Matthews, documentation, and shared it only with 3 people. My dad, Julia, a local family therapist who ran group sessions for estranged parents and teens, someone Karen had connected me with after the speech. Each document was time-stamped, organized, professional. I didn't release it publicly. I didn't blackmail her. I didn't torch her reputation in some grand explosion. But I lit a quiet fire under her foundation. And within a week, I started getting confirmation. Chloe's school called to say Erin had tried to enroll her in an extracurricular on the wrong day. And when they asked for an updated custody agreement, she panicked and left. The school counselor emailed me, asking if I could speak on Chloe's behalf as her primary guardian figure. The board from the fundraiser reached out and asked if I wanted to apply for a part-time leadership role. Even my mother, who had blocked me 3 months prior, sent a single, shaky email. I don't know what to believe anymore. But I'm listening now. And Erin? She tried to retaliate, of course. Posted a Facebook screed about narcissistic relatives and smear campaigns. claimed I was stealing her daughter and pretending to be a hero. But this time, no one listened. Because her image, polished, performative, pitiful, had been exposed. Not loudly, not cruelly, but with the one thing she couldn't control, the truth. And as for Chloe, we started talking about longer-term plans. Therapy, summer internships, college tours, a future where she made decisions based on want, not fear. The revenge wasn't a headline. It wasn't a courtroom outburst or a viral video. It was a quiet shifting of power. A house rebuilt, brick by brick, without the people who kept setting fires inside. But before I tell you what finally happened when Erin showed up at my door again, with a lawyer and a new lie up her sleeve, there's one more thing you need to know. Because my final move? That one came with witnesses. Erin showed up at my door one last time. Not alone, not with an apology, but with a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else and a thin manila folder she kept clutching like a weapon. It was late afternoon, just before sunset. Chloe was out volunteering at the community center. The air was crisp, the light golden. For a moment, it almost felt like peace. Until I opened the door. Erin didn't wait for a greeting. She stepped forward, face hard, voice clipped. "You've made this very difficult." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You're not coming in." Her lawyer, mid-40s, beige suit, thin tie, offered a rehearsed half-smile. "Mr. Matthews, I'm here on behalf of Ms. Matthews to discuss a proposed guardianship arrangement. Chloe is a minor, and her current living situation has not been legally approved by her custodial parent." I said nothing, just looked at him. Erin pressed forward. "You can't keep her. She's my daughter. I'm her mother. This charade ends today." I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I stepped back, just enough to reach behind the door and pull out a folder of my own, twice the thickness of hers, tabbed, stamped, and fresh off my lawyer's desk. "I was hoping you'd come," I said, handing it over. The lawyer took it, flipped it open. His brows began to knit together before he'd even passed the first 3 pages. Erin's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" "Documentation," I said calmly. "Every message, every screenshot, every financial request you made while pretending Chloe's needs were your own. The CPS false report, the forged lease, the threats, the witnesses, your name, your words, your voice, your actions." Her lawyer cleared his throat. "Ms. Matthews, did you?" "I told you, it's all exaggerated," she snapped. I tilted my head. "Oh, it's more than that." I reached into my pocket and pulled out one final piece. An official copy of a court-filed motion. Temporary guardianship of Chloe Matthews, petitioned by Alexander Matthews, supported by child's statement, community affidavits, and professional evaluation. Her lawyer's face paled. "You didn't tell me there was a motion filed." "She can't take her," Erin shouted. "She's my daughter." "She's 16, I said quietly. "Old enough to speak for herself in front of a judge." And she did. "She's been in therapy for the last 3 months. She told them everything. About the pressure, the manipulation, the screaming, the guilt. They listened. And so did the court." Erin's mouth opened. No sound came out. I stepped forward, not threatening, just steady. "You spent your life twisting people into guilt. You used Chloe like a lifeline, like a trophy. You tried to make her shine just enough so no one would see the cracks in your world. But she's not your second chance. She's not your excuse. She's not your tool." I leaned in slightly, just enough that only she and her lawyer could hear. "She's free of you now." Erin staggered back a step. For the first time, I saw it, real fear. Not performance, not indignation, just the slow, crumbling realization that her world, the one she carefully built on half-truths and family loyalty, was collapsing. Her lawyer cleared his throat. "We'll be in touch." "I'm sure," I said, already closing the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't lock it right away. I just stood there for a long moment, staring at the wood grain, feeling everything I'd carried for years slide off my shoulders. The silence on the other side told me she was still there. But she didn't knock again. She didn't come back. Not that night. Not ever. Fallout came swiftly and quietly. The court granted me temporary guardianship of Chloe with a path to permanent custody by the time she turned 17. Erin tried to fight it, but the weight of her own actions, documented, verified, undeniable, sank her before the hearings even began. Her lawyer withdrew. Chloe's therapist testified. The community center director wrote a letter. Even my dad, who'd once told me to pay up or be dead to us, stood in court and called Erin a danger to her daughter's emotional well-being. That broke something in her. After the ruling, Erin went radio silent. No messages, no threats, just absence. A vacuum where her chaos used to live. Jared left her a month later. Rumor was he moved in with someone he met at work, someone quieter, softer. He didn't contact Chloe. No surprise there. As for my parents, it took time. My mom didn't show up to the hearing. She sent a statement, handwritten, shaking in parts, saying she didn't know what to believe. But a few weeks later, she called Chloe. Not to ask for forgiveness, just to ask how she was sleeping. Progress, in its own way. My dad started calling more. Just to chat. To ask about my workshop. To say things like, "Your niece is lucky," in that stiff, reluctant voice that meant he was trying. It was enough. And Chloe? She thrived. She started applying to art programs. She made new friends. She let go of the Instagram page her mom had run for her like a PR campaign. She started sketching again, real stuff this time. Honest. Raw. One night, I found a pencil drawing she'd left on the kitchen table. Two people standing on opposite cliffs, connected by a single bridge made of words. She looked at me and said, "That's us." I hung it on the wall. 6 months later, at the annual fundraiser for the community center, I gave another speech. This time, Chloe introduced me. She stood on that stage, confident, clear-eyed, steady, and said, "This is my uncle. He didn't just help me. He saw me." And that changed everything. When I stepped up to speak, I didn't talk about family or sacrifice or revenge. I talked about freedom, the kind you build with your own hands, the kind you earn when you stop apologizing for stepping away from people who only ever loved you for what you gave them. And afterward, when people clapped and Karen hugged me and the board offered me a formal position, I caught a glimpse of someone standing near the exit. Erin, just for a second. She looked thinner, smaller, not physically, just deflated. She didn't come closer, didn't make a scene. She just stood there, watching, and I realized something. She didn't come to win. She came to witness, to see what I'd built after she'd tried to tear me down, to see that her absence hadn't broken me. It had revealed me. She turned and left without a word, and I never saw her again. Chloe turned 18 last month. She got into her dream program. We packed her things into the back of my car and drove 6 hours to her new apartment. She cried when we got there. So did I, but not from sadness, from relief, from awe, from knowing she'd done it. She built her own bridge. And as I stood there, watching her step into a life that didn't begin with someone else's script, I thought about all the versions of myself I'd had to bury to get here. The scared kid, the quiet son, the convenient brother. And I smiled, because none of them would have survived this long war. But I did. And when I walked away from that dorm room, I didn't feel alone. I felt free. Final line. The best thing I ever did for my family was stop trying to belong to it. When I read my parents' will and saw they left everything to our cousin, the one they always called their real son, I quietly stopped covering their bills. A few weeks later, MOM texted, "Transfer the money for the mortgage." No greeting, no small talk. I simply replied. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the neat little stack of papers that would change how I saw my family forever. My name's John, I'm 32, and I had just finished reading my parents' will. Every last page, every clause, every signature. And there it was in black ink. Everything, and I mean everything. The house, the land, Dad's classic car collection, Mom's jewelry, all of it had been left to my cousin Daniel. The same cousin my parents always called their real son, whenever they were feeling particularly cruel. I wish I could say I was shocked, but honestly, I just felt hollow, like something I already suspected had finally been confirmed. Growing up, my parents were masters at letting me know where I stood, or rather, where I didn't stand, in the family hierarchy. Daniel was golden boy, the pride of the family, the one they showed off at every holiday dinner. Daniel just got promoted. Daniel just bought a new house. Daniel's probably going to be a millionaire before 30. Meanwhile, when I graduated college, Mom literally said, "Oh, that's nice, John," before asking me to take out the trash. For years, I kept telling myself they'd come around. I worked hard, paid my own way, and even covered their bills when Dad got laid off. Every month, I quietly transferred money to make sure their mortgage stayed paid, their lights stayed on, and Mom could keep her ridiculous subscription to that Wine of the Month club she loved so much. It wasn't about gratitude anymore. I'd given up on hearing thank you. It was about making sure they were okay. Because no matter how distant they kept me, they were still my parents. But that was a knife in the gut. Not just because they left me nothing, but because it felt intentional. As if they wanted me to know, once and for all, that I was just the kid they happened to raise, not the one they actually cared about. I sat there for a long time, rereading the same lines, wondering if maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe there was a trust or a letter or something hidden away from me. But no, the lawyer was clear. The estate was Daniel's. So I did something that surprised even me. I stopped paying. No text, no announcement, no dramatic speech about how I was done. I just stopped. I let the due dates come and go. I let the utilities send their polite little reminders. And then one Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. No greeting, no small talk. Just, transfer the money for the mortgage. I stared at the screen, a dozen emotions fighting to be heard in my head. Hurt, anger, exhaustion. I thought about all the times I'd bailed them out, all the sacrifices I'd made to keep things running smoothly, and how they'd repaid me by making sure I didn't even get the house I was helping to keep. I started typing, then deleted it, then typed again. My hands were literally shaking, not from fear, but from years of pent-up frustration that had nowhere to go until this moment. I could feel something inside me shifting, a line being drawn. And then, just as I was about to hit send, another message popped up from her. Daniel said you've been acting cold lately. Is something wrong? Something in me snapped, not in a loud, shouting way, but in that quiet, dangerous way where you finally decide you're done being the family doormat. I took a deep breath, set my coffee cup down, and smiled to myself as I typed out a reply that would be the first step in a very different chapter of my life. And that's where everything really started to spiral. The next morning, I woke up to a string of missed calls, all from my mom. There were voicemails too, each one sounding increasingly annoyed. The first one was neutral, clipped. John, call me back. Mortgage is due today. The second was sharper. Why haven't you transferred it yet? You know how important it is to keep things current. Don't make this difficult. By the third, she was practically hissing into the phone. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this is unacceptable. Call me. I just sat there on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone like it was some kind of alien object. A few months ago, those voicemails would have sent me spiraling, guilt, panic, the whole thing. I would have grabbed my laptop and paid the bill before I even brushed my teeth, just to keep the peace. But now, I just felt numb, like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. I didn't call her back. Instead, I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and went to work like nothing happened. But all day, I couldn't shake this low hum of dread in the back of my mind. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted. Not because I was worried about them, but because I knew this was just the beginning. My parents never handled being ignored well. Sure enough, that night, I got a text from my dad. Call your mother. She's upset. That was it. No, how are you? No, is everything okay? Just a command. I didn't reply. The following weekend, I went over to their house because Daniel was in town, and despite everything, I wasn't ready to fully cut them off. Part of me hoped maybe things would feel normal, that maybe we could have a family dinner without me being reminded where I ranked. Big mistake. I walked into the living room, and there was Daniel, lounging on the couch like he owned the place, which, technically, I guess he did now. Mom was perched on the arm of the sofa, smiling like she was hosting royalty. John, she said, her face lighting up just enough to register, but not enough to feel genuine. You're late. Daniel's been telling us about his new promotion. I glanced at the clock. I wasn't late. Dinner wasn't even ready yet. Daniel grinned, clearly loving the attention. Yeah, they finally made me team lead. Big raise, too. Mom beamed at him. We're so proud of you. You worked so hard, sweetie. She'd never once used that tone with me. Dad clapped Daniel on the shoulder. We knew you'd get it. Always knew you'd go far. I sat there, pretending to be happy for him, but each word felt like a splinter under my skin. I wanted to scream, I work hard too. I've been paying for this house while you two sit here bragging about someone else. Dinner was worse. Every time I tried to contribute to the conversation, someone would cut me off. Daniel, yeah, at my company we. Mom, oh, that's fascinating. John, pass the salad, will you? Or, me, I actually got a big client this week. Dad. Daniel, did you tell him about your bonus? It was like I was invisible, just there to refill drinks and clear plates. At one point, Mom actually handed me her wine glass and said, "Top me up, would you? You're closer." I bit back the words I wanted to say and just did it. After dinner, we were sitting around the table when Mom suddenly dropped it. "By the way, John, the electric bill came in. I went ahead and paid it this time, but you'll need to reimburse me. You know we can't let it get behind." I just stared at her. "You paid it?" "Yes." Her tone was sharp now, like she was scolding a child. "And frankly, I don't know what this little phase is about, but it needs to stop. We have responsibilities, John. This is a family home." Daniel smirked into his drink, clearly enjoying the show. "Yeah, man. Don't leave them hanging." I turned to look at him, and something in my face must have changed because his smile faltered for half a second before coming back twice as smug. Dad crossed his arms. "You've been acting different. Cold. Your mother's worried." I almost laughed. "Worried? Not about me, about the bills. I just think," Mom continued, her voice rising, "that after everything we've done for you, the least you can do is keep up your end. Your cousin shouldn't have to worry about coming home to a foreclosure notice one day." There it was. The first slip. I leaned back in my chair. "So this is about Daniel." Mom blinked. "This is about all of us. About family." "No," I said quietly. "It's about making sure Daniel's inheritance stays in perfect shape, isn't it?" The room went dead silent. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, and Dad's jaw tightened. Mom's lips thinned. "That's not fair." I stood up slowly. "No, what's not fair is asking me to bankroll a house I don't even get to keep. What's not fair is being treated like a stranger in my own family while I pay for you to sit here and praise someone else." Her face hardened. "Sit down, John. Don't make a scene." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. "I think I'm gonna head out," I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. Daniel chuckled under his breath. "Touchy." I didn't respond. I just grabbed my coat and walked out, leaving their stunned silence behind me. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. Mom's tone, Dad's crossed arms, Daniel's smirk. It was like they'd been waiting for me to crack, like they got some twisted satisfaction out of pushing me to the edge. The next morning, another text. "Mortgage is overdue. Call me." And then another. "Do you want this house to go into default?" And then, finally, "If you can't handle this, maybe Daniel should take over completely. He's always been more responsible anyway." I stared at that last one for a long time. My coffee went cold in my hand. Responsible. Always been more responsible. It was almost funny if it hadn't hurt so much. That's when I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about respect, or rather, the complete lack of it. And I wasn't going to play along quietly this time. But before I could even figure out my next move, something happened that turned everything upside down and made sure there was no going back. A few days passed in this weird, tense quiet. No calls, no texts. Part of me thought maybe they were cooling off. Maybe we could let this whole thing blow over without another fight. I even started to feel a little guilty, wondering if I'd overreacted by storming out. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe they didn't mean it the way it sounded. Then came Sunday. Mom called that morning, and, to my surprise, her voice was chipper, almost sweet. "John, why don't you come over tonight? We're having a little get-together. Daniel's still in town, and it would be nice to just have everyone under one roof again." I hesitated. "Just dinner?" "Of course," she said too quickly. "Just dinner. We'll have your favorite roast chicken." I wanted to believe her. I really did. So I said yes. When I arrived that evening, the house was already buzzing. More cars were parked out front than I expected. Inside, I was greeted by the smell of food and the sound of laughter coming from the dining room. It felt almost normal. "John," Dad said, clapping me on the back when I walked in. "Glad you made it. Grab a drink. We're about to start." I walked into the dining room, and that's when I saw it. There was a cake on the table. A big one, with "Congratulations, Daniel," written across the top in bright blue frosting. I frowned. "What's this?" Mom smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Oh, we just thought we'd celebrate Daniel's promotion properly. Isn't it great news?" I stood there, feeling like I'd just been shoved into an alternate reality. "You invited me over for a party?" She tilted her head, clearly annoyed at my tone. "Well, yes. You should be happy for your cousin. He's accomplished so much." I forced a polite nod and took a seat, trying to swallow the lump forming in my throat. The whole dinner was one long monologue about Daniel's job, Daniel's apartment, Daniel's new girlfriend. Every time I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, someone would loop it right back. But the real betrayal didn't come until dessert. Dad stood up, holding his glass. Before we cut the cake, we have a little announcement. I froze. Announcement? Mom stood too, her hand on Daniel's shoulder like he was the guest of honor at some royal banquet. We've been talking, and we've decided it's time to make things official. Daniel has agreed to take over all the financial responsibilities for the house. My stomach dropped. Effective immediately, Dad added, smiling. We're transferring all accounts and utilities to his name. He's even offered to set up automatic payments so we never fall behind again. The room erupted in applause. I just sat there, staring at them. My mind was spinning. Effective immediately? They hadn't even told me. Mom glanced at me, her smile tightening. This way, you don't have to worry about anything anymore. Isn't that a relief? A relief. That's what she called it. As if I hadn't been the one holding this whole thing together for years. But then Daniel spoke up, and it felt like someone lit a match inside me. Yeah, we figured it was best to have someone responsible handle it. No offense, John, but it's been a little rocky lately. No offense. Like it was a joke. The table chuckled softly, like this was all so reasonable, so civil. I felt my ears ringing. So that's it. You just hand everything over without even talking to me. Mom's smile faltered. We didn't want to upset you. Upset me. My voice cracked. You think not telling me was better? Daniel leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the moment. Hey, man, don't take it personally. It's just easier this way. Easier for who? I shot back. For everyone, Dad said, his tone firm now, like I was the unreasonable one. Look, John, you've been distant, and we can't have the house falling behind on payments. This is just practical. I stared at them, speechless. Practical. That's what they called it. Mom reached for my hand across the table, her voice soft. This doesn't mean we don't appreciate what you've done. But Daniel is in a better position right now. He can handle it. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, Daniel raised his glass. To family, he said, smirking. And to keeping this place in good hands. Everyone clinked glasses. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. I just sat there, feeling this hot wave of shame and anger wash over me. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about being replaced, publicly, deliberately, in front of people who thought this was all perfectly fine. When I didn't toast, Mom's smile dropped completely. John, she said sharply, don't be rude. This is a happy occasion. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped across the floor. Happy for who? The room went dead silent. John, Dad warned. I looked around at all of them, my parents, my cousin, these family friends who'd come to watch the show, and I realized something. They weren't embarrassed. They weren't sorry. They actually believed this was the right thing to do. I hope you all enjoy your cake, I said, my voice low. Because I'm done. I turned and walked out before anyone could stop me. Outside, the cold air hit me like a slap. I stood there on the porch, shaking, not from the chill, but from everything boiling under my skin. Humiliation, heartbreak, rage, all of it crashing over me at once. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I got inside, I just stood in my dark living room, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle over me. This wasn't just a snub. This was deliberate, calculated. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel before. I wanted them to regret it. Not just tonight. Not just tomorrow. I wanted them to feel it. And I knew, deep down, this wasn't the last move I was going to make. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I just lay there on the couch, staring at the ceiling as shadows from the streetlight outside crawled across my living room walls. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that's so heavy it almost feels like it's pressing down on you. At around 2 in the morning, I got up and made myself a cup of tea, even though I don't really drink tea, and sat at the kitchen table where I'd first read the will. The papers were still there in a neat little stack, like they were mocking me. I pulled them closer, scanning the words again, even though I already knew what they said. Everything to Daniel. Every last thing. I don't know how long I sat there, but at some point I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Holidays, birthdays, random backyard barbecues. There was one picture from a few years back, Dad on the grill, Mom holding a glass of wine, Daniel with his arm around my shoulders. We were all smiling. I stared at it for a long time, my throat tight. I remembered that day. I'd paid for all the food for that barbecue. Mom had told me I should, since I was the one without kids or a mortgage. And I'd done it. Happily. It hit me then just how much of myself I had poured into this family. My time, my money, my energy, and how little I'd ever asked for in return. Just a bit of respect. A thank you here and there. A place at the table, literally and figuratively. And instead, I'd been replaced. By morning, I felt like I'd been hollowed out. I went through the motions of my day, went to work, answered emails, sat through meetings, but everything felt distant, muted. People asked me if I was okay, and I just smiled and said I was tired. That weekend, I stayed home. I didn't answer calls, didn't reply to texts. I just let the phone buzz and buzz until it went silent. At one point, I heard my parents' voices outside my apartment door, Mom's sharp, Dad's low and stern, but I didn't open it. I sat perfectly still until they left. Later that night, I got a text from a family friend. "Hey, are you okay? Heard things got pretty tense the other night." I stared at it, feeling my chest tighten. They were already talking about it. The thought of being the subject of whispered conversations over brunch tables made me feel sick. A couple of days later, I went to the grocery store and saw Daniel in the parking lot. He was laughing with someone on the phone, and I swear I heard him say, "Yeah, he totally lost it. You should have seen his face." He didn't see me. I got back in my car and drove away without buying a thing. That night was the worst. I sat on the edge of my bed with my head in my hands, feeling like I was back in high school, like I was 16 again, being told for the 100th time that Daniel was just more responsible, more mature, more successful. Except this time, it wasn't just words. This time, they'd acted on it. They'd taken my effort, my sacrifices, and written me out of the story completely. I'll admit, there was a moment where I wondered if I should just cave. Call them, apologize, beg to be included again, pay the mortgage like nothing happened, keep the peace. But then I remembered the look on Mom's face at that table. Not guilty, not even conflicted. Proud, smug almost, like she thought she'd finally solved me. And something in me hardened. I started cleaning my apartment. Not just picking up, but really cleaning, throwing out old junk, boxing up things I didn't need. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something quieter, like I was stripping away the last bits of my old life, preparing for. I didn't even know what yet. One night, I sat down with a notepad and started writing. At first, it was just a list of bills I'd covered over the years, just to see how much it added up to. Then I started writing down memories. The Christmas when they spent twice as much on Daniel as on me. The time they forgot to invite me to a family vacation because they assumed I wouldn't want to come. The night Mom told me she wished I'd turn out more like Daniel. By the time I was done, I had several pages filled. I stared at them for a long time. For the first time in days, I felt something other than sadness. It was still pain, yes, but now it had an edge, a direction. I wasn't ready to act yet, but I could feel the first flicker of resolve, the tiniest spark of something that would eventually turn into fire. I tucked the pages into a drawer, turned off the light, and lay in bed. For the first time that week, I slept. Not well, not deeply, but enough. And when I woke up the next morning, I knew I wasn't going to stay at the bottom forever. I was going to climb out. Quietly, carefully. And when I did, I wasn't going back. The morning after I wrote those pages, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic, no thunderclap, no epiphany, but it was enough. I woke up earlier than usual, sat at the edge of the bed, and just breathed. My chest still felt heavy, but it wasn't crushing me anymore. I started small. I made breakfast, a real one, not just coffee and whatever was in the fridge. I put on clothes that weren't just the same hoodie I'd been living in for days. I opened the curtains and let the sunlight in. It felt strange, but good, like my apartment was mine again instead of a cave where I hid from the world. That week at work, I threw myself into projects like I hadn't in months. Instead of clocking in and zoning out, I stayed late, polished presentations, volunteered to take the lead on something my boss had been struggling to assign. My coworkers noticed. "You seem different," one of them said as we were leaving one night. "Better different?" I asked. She smiled. "Yeah, like you care again." That stuck with me. By the end of the month, I'd closed 2 new clients and gotten a quiet nod of approval from my boss, the kind that usually meant good things at review time. My paycheck reflected the change too. I took some of that money and started looking for a new place. My apartment wasn't bad, but it felt too close to everything, too close to them. I needed space, a fresh start. After a few weeks of searching, I found it. A loft apartment across town, tucked away in an old converted factory building with exposed brick walls and tall windows. The rent was higher, but with my new workload and income, I could afford it. Moving day felt like shedding a skin. I packed up everything in silence, loading box after box into the back of a rental truck, and with every trip down those apartment stairs, I felt lighter. When I turned in my old keys, I didn't look back. The first night in the new place, I didn't even set up a bed. I just lay on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, smiling like an idiot. The air felt different here. Quiet, yes, but not suffocating. I started rebuilding my life piece by piece. I joined a gym for the first time in years. At first, I hated it. I felt awkward and out of place, fumbling through routines while everyone else seemed to know exactly what they were doing. But after a few weeks, I started to notice changes. My posture was better. My sleep was deeper. I had more energy during the day. I started cooking more too. Real meals, not just takeout or frozen dinners. There was something weirdly therapeutic about chopping vegetables, searing chicken, and sitting down to a dinner I made for myself. On weekends, I took long walks around the city, finding coffee shops and bookstores I'd never noticed before. I started talking to people again. The barista who remembered my order, the guy at the gym who spotted me on bench press, the neighbor down the hall who always said good morning. Slowly, almost without realizing it, I built a little circle of support. One Friday night, I hosted a game night in my new apartment. Just a few friends from work, some snacks, music in the background. At one point, I caught myself laughing. Like really laughing, the kind that makes your stomach hurt, and realized it was the first time I'd felt light in months. When everyone left, I stood in the doorway for a while, looking around my place. It was warm now, lived in. Mine. But I hadn't forgotten. The pages I'd written that night after the announcement dinner were still in my drawer. Sometimes I'd take them out and read through them, not to dwell on the pain, but to remind myself why I was doing all this, why I was building something for myself. One night, about 3 months after I moved, I got a text from my mom. "Daniel is moving into the house officially this weekend. We'd love for you to come by and help him settle in." I stared at the message for a long time. Help him settle in. I put the phone down and went back to what I was doing, working on a proposal for a client who could single-handedly double my annual commission if they signed. I didn't reply. By summer, things were moving fast. I got that client, and with it came a raise, a big one. Enough that I could max out my savings account and start investing. It wasn't just about money, though. It was about finally feeling in control. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to life. I was steering it. I started keeping a journal, jotting down ideas for the future. Things I wanted to do, places I wanted to go. Plans. And tucked between those hopeful notes were sharper ones. Reminders of what had happened, of what I wouldn't let happen again. I wasn't ready to confront them yet. Not quite. But I could feel the day coming closer. Every achievement, every step forward, every new piece of stability I built, it was all leading somewhere. Somewhere they wouldn't see coming. It was late August when the first real opportunity landed in my lap. I was sitting at my desk after hours, wrapping up some client calls, when I got an email from my boss. Subject: Leadership Training Cohort, Nominations. She'd recommended me for an advanced program the company offered, a fast-track track for employees they considered future leadership material. It wasn't just fluff, either. This was the kind of program that came with mentorship from senior executives, networking with decision-makers, and even exposure to the legal and financial sides of the business. I said yes before I even finished reading the email. The program kicked off a month later, and from the very first session, I felt like I was standing on higher ground. We covered negotiation, conflict resolution, financial literacy, and, the part that caught my attention most, estate planning and inheritance law. Normally, I would have skimmed that last module, but this time, I was laser-focused. The instructor explained how wills worked, how probate could be challenged under certain conditions, and the different ways assets could be shielded or moved if someone contested them. My pen flew across the page as I took notes. That night, I went home and dug those papers out of my drawer again. I read every line, every date, every signature. And for the first time, I wasn't just seeing the betrayal. I was seeing potential cracks. There were things in that will that didn't add up. Timelines that were too close together. Witnesses that raised eyebrows. One clause in particular, about the house being passed free and clear of all encumbrances, practically leapt off the page. Because it wasn't free and clear. I'd been paying that mortgage for years. Quietly. Consistently. Every single month. And I had the bank statements to prove it. I stayed up half the night pulling records. Old emails, payment receipts, copies of text messages where mom had reminded me of due dates. I built a neat little folder, physical and digital, until I had a stack thick enough to make my point in any courtroom. The next weekend, I decided to visit them. Not because I wanted to see them, but because I wanted them to see me. When I pulled into the driveway, Daniel's car was parked front and center, like a trophy. The house looked freshly painted. There were new flower beds along the walkway. My money had paid for those once. Mom opened the door, clearly surprised. "John, we weren't expecting you." "I was in the neighborhood," I said casually, stepping inside. Daniel was sprawled on the couch, watching TV. "Well, look who it is," he said with a grin. I ignored him and looked around. The place looked good, I had to admit. Lived in, but cared for. My chest tightened. "We just put in new carpet," Mom said proudly. "Yeah," Daniel added, smirking. "Figured it was time to make this place really mine." I smiled faintly. "Looks nice." For the rest of the visit, I was calm. Pleasant, even. I asked about the renovations, complimented the new furniture, even offered to help replace the back deck if they needed. Mom looked at me like she didn't quite trust the change in tone. "It's good to see you in better spirits," she said carefully. I nodded. "Yeah, things have been going really well lately." That part was true, very true. We chatted a bit longer before I left, but as I walked back to my car, I caught a glimpse of Daniel watching me from the window, his expression somewhere between smug and suspicious. Back at home, I opened my laptop and started formalizing everything. I contacted an estate lawyer, a quiet, competent woman recommended by one of my mentors in the leadership program, and asked her a few questions. When I explained my situation, she actually chuckled. "You've been covering the mortgage for how many years?" 6, I said. She nodded slowly, jotting notes. "Depending on how the will is structured, you may have grounds to claim reimbursement for every payment you've made, potentially with interest. That could be significant." I sat there, letting that sink in. Significant was an understatement. "And," she continued, "if the will wasn't updated properly after you became the primary financial contributor to the property, there's a chance you could challenge the entire distribution." I didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at her. "You don't have to decide right now," she said gently. "But if you'd like, I can start drafting a demand letter." Sometimes that's all it takes to get people to the table. When I left her office, I wasn't just holding my folder anymore. I was holding a weapon. Over the next few weeks, I kept playing the part of the calm, reformed son. I sent Mom polite texts asking how she was. I even dropped by once or twice with little gifts, fresh bread from a bakery near my new place, a bottle of wine I knew she liked. Every time I saw them, I felt steadier. Every time Daniel smirked, every time Dad made a backhanded comment, I just smiled. Inside, though, I was sharpening the blade. The last time I visited before everything started, Mom hugged me at the door. "It's so nice to have you back," she said warmly. I hugged her back, smiling over her shoulder. "I never left," I said quietly. But this time, I meant something very different. When I got home that night, I opened my laptop, clicked on the folder I'd built, and sent everything to my lawyer. Proceed. I closed the computer, leaned back in my chair, and for the first time since that dinner, I felt completely calm. Whatever was coming next, I was ready for it. 2 weeks later, my lawyer sent the letter. It was beautifully written, professional, measured, almost polite, but every line carried weight. It outlined every mortgage payment I'd made, complete with dates and amounts. It cited the clause in the will about the house being free and clear, and explained, in careful legal language, that the property was only in that state because of my financial contributions. The closing paragraph was my favorite. Our client is prepared to file a formal claim for reimbursement with interest and, if necessary, contest the validity of the will on the basis of inequitable treatment of a primary contributor. We would prefer to resolve this matter amicably. Amicably. Such a nice word for you. Have one chance to make this right before we bring the entire legal system down on you. We sent copies to my parents and to the executor of the estate. And then, I waited. It didn't take long. 3 days later, I got the first text from Mom. What is this letter? Call me immediately. I didn't. Then came one from Dad. This is ridiculous. You wouldn't actually do this to your own family. I let that one sit too. Finally, Daniel texted me. Wow, really, man? You're going to lawyer up over this? That's pathetic. I smiled at my phone, set it down, and went back to work on a client proposal. A week later, my lawyer called. They've asked for a meeting, she said. At the house. I agreed. Walking up that driveway felt different this time. I wasn't coming as the son who'd been written off, the invisible helper. I was coming as someone with leverage. Inside, the air was tense. Mom sat on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. Dad stood by the fireplace, his jaw tight. Daniel was leaning against the wall, trying to look casual but clearly rattled. My lawyer and I sat across from them at the table. She opened her briefcase and laid out the documents like playing cards, calm and precise. We're here to discuss settlement, she began. Dad bristled. This is unnecessary. He's already out of the will. Which is precisely why we're here, my lawyer said smoothly. Mr. Miller has made substantial financial contributions to this property. Without him, it would not be the asset it is today. Daniel scoffed. Oh, come on. He just made some payments. She turned to him, her tone still pleasant but steely. Some payments totaling over $120,000, Mr. Miller. I have every bank statement right here. Would you like me to read them out loud? His face went pale. Mom jumped in, her voice pleading now. We're family. Surely we can work this out without dragging lawyers into it. My lawyer smiled politely. That's exactly why we're here. To work it out. Then she looked at me. Would you like to speak? I took a deep breath and nodded. I'm not here to fight, I said, my voice calm and even. I just want what's fair. I carried this house for years. Quietly. Without complaint. And when I stopped, instead of asking me why, you replaced me. Publicly. Mom's face crumpled a little at that, but I kept going. I'm not asking for the house. I'm not asking for jewelry or heirlooms. All I want is to be repaid for what I put in. That's it. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Dad sighed, the fight going out of him. What are you asking for? My lawyer slid the document across the table. Here's the itemized total. We're willing to accept repayment in a single lump sum or through liquidation of assets if that's easier. Daniel grabbed the paper and skimmed it, his face growing red. This is insane, he snapped. You're bleeding us dry. I looked at him, my expression unreadable. Funny. That's how I felt all those years I was covering for you. He opened his mouth to argue, then shut it again. After a long, tense back and forth, most of it handled by my lawyer, they finally agreed. The house would be refinanced under Daniel's name, and a portion of that refinance would go directly to me. When the meeting ended, I stood up, calm and collected. Thank you, I said simply, gathering my things. As I reached the door, Daniel muttered under his breath, Hope you're happy. I turned back just enough to look him in the eye. I will be, I said softly. And I meant it. 2 weeks later, the funds hit my account. Seeing that number there, money I'd earned back, money I could now use for my future, gave me a rush of satisfaction I can't even describe. I didn't call them. I didn't gloat. But when I signed the lease for a small office space to start the business I'd been dreaming about, I allowed myself a quiet smile. Because now, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something that no one could take away. Fallout came faster than I expected. It started with the phone calls. First Mom, then Dad, then Mom again. I didn't answer. Their voicemails were a strange progression. First pleading, John, we just want to talk. Then defensive, you didn't have to go this far. Then almost accusatory, I hope you're happy now. Your father is stressed out and Daniel is furious. I let them sit unheard. Then came the family ripple effect. A cousin texted me, saying there was drama in the group chat. Apparently, Daniel was furious about having to refinance and was ranting that I had bled him dry. Another relative chimed in to point out that I had, in fact, paid for the house for years, and maybe it was time someone acknowledged that. That message sparked an argument that apparently ended with Daniel storming out of Sunday dinner. I stayed quiet, but the real fallout came a month later. I was sitting in my new office, a small but beautiful space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, when Mom showed up unannounced. She looked smaller somehow, like the last few weeks had worn her down. John, she said softly, standing in the doorway. Can we talk? I motioned for her to sit. For a moment, she just looked around, taking in the space. The framed client contracts on the wall, the tidy desk, the faint hum of success that seemed to hang in the air. "You've built something here," she said finally. "I have." She swallowed hard. "We didn't mean to hurt you." I didn't reply. Her hands twisted in her lap. "Your father thinks you went too far. Daniel, well, he's angry. But I wanted you to know that I understand. You were right. About all of it. That almost got me. Almost." But then I remembered her standing at that dinner table, her hand on Daniel's shoulder, smiling like I was nothing more than a problem she'd just solved. "I'm glad you understand," I said finally, my voice calm. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes glossy. "I miss you." I leaned back in my chair. "You miss who you thought I was. But that person doesn't exist anymore." Her face crumpled at that, but she nodded. "I suppose that's fair." When she left, I sat in silence for a long time, staring out at the city. A week later, I heard from my lawyer that the refinance had gone through. My reimbursement was officially finalized. And then, almost poetically, I got a text from Daniel. "Hope you're proud of yourself. I had to cash out my bonus to cover this. You ruined my plans this year." I read it twice, then set my phone down. Because the truth was, I was proud of myself. Not just for winning, but for finally stepping out of the shadow they'd kept me in for so long. By Thanksgiving, I had no intention of going to the family dinner. But then, a mutual cousin called and asked if I'd reconsider, said it might be good for everyone to clear the air. I don't know what made me say yes, but I did. When I walked in that evening, the room went quiet. Daniel was there, sitting at the table with his arms crossed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mom smiled weakly. Dad gave me a curt nod. I sat down without a word. Dinner was awkward at first, full of stilted small talk and the sound of silverware clinking. Then, halfway through the meal, Daniel put down his fork. "You got what you wanted," he said flatly. I met his eyes. "I got what was mine." He scoffed. "You're unbelievable." "Enough, Daniel," Mom said sharply. "He's not wrong." That silenced him. The rest of the meal was quiet, but not tense, just resigned. Like everyone knew the hierarchy had shifted permanently. When dessert was served, I stood up. "Thank you for dinner," I said, my voice steady. "But I should be going." As I walked to the door, I felt all their eyes on me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. I opened the door, stepped out into the crisp night air, and smiled to myself. Because this time, I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I was walking away on my own terms, and they knew it. And as the door closed behind me, one final thought hit me, clear and sharp, like the strike of a bell. I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I was the one they'd never forget. If you ever meet my cousin Brandon, you'll probably love him. Or at least, you'll think you do, until he opens his mouth. He's the kind of guy who walks into a room like he owns it, drops names like loose change, and somehow always ends up in the spotlight, even when no one invited him to begin with. Growing up, he was that kid. The one with the latest iPhone before the rest of us even knew a new model was coming out. The one who never got grounded because he had potential. The one whose mistakes were just youthful ambition, while mine were poor judgment. Yeah, that kind of cousin. My name's Ryan. I'm 33 now, but this all started when I was around 7 years old, sitting at the kids' table during Thanksgiving while Brandon bragged about the new go-kart his dad got him, just because. I still remember how the cranberry sauce on my plate looked like blood when I stabbed it too hard with my plastic fork. I hated how everyone laughed along as he listed off everything he'd gotten that month like it was some kind of royal decree. But I didn't say anything. Not then. Brandon was my mom's older sister's only child, which in our extended family might as well have made him the crown prince. Aunt Linda was one of those suburban matriarchs who dressed like every event was a charity gala and spoke with the slow, deliberate cadence of someone used to people hanging on to her every word. She married Uncle Greg, a lawyer with enough slickness to make a snake uncomfortable. Between them, they created Brandon, the golden child. Meanwhile, my mom raised me alone after my dad dipped before I was born. We didn't have much. Hand-me-downs, library books, and secondhand dreams were pretty much our currency. But we had grit, and we had each other. Still, every family event was a reminder that we were barely tolerated, like guests overstaying their welcome. Aunt Linda always forgot to tell us about the dress code. Uncle Greg made little comments about how hard it must be to manage on a single income. And Brandon? He'd perfected the art of the backhanded compliment by middle school. "Oh, cool shoes, Ryan. Are those vintage? By the time we were in high school, the gap between us wasn't just financial. It was everything. He was captain of the debate team, his parents bought him a brand new BMW when he turned 16, and he had a college admissions coach by sophomore year. Meanwhile, I was flipping burgers after school, trying to save up for a busted 2002 Corolla I'd spotted in a neighbor's yard. I didn't hate him exactly. It was more complicated than that. I resented what he represented, what he got handed, what I had to fight tooth and nail for. Thanksgiving became a ritual of endurance. My mom would make green bean casserole and her famous pecan pie, dress up in her nicest Target sweater, and smile through the passive-aggressive jabs. I used to ask her why we still went, and she'd just say, because family's family. And sometimes, showing up is the best revenge. I didn't get it then. I do now. This past year, though, this was the Thanksgiving everything changed. But before I get there, you need to understand something about how I spent the last decade. While Brandon went off to an Ivy League school, racked up LinkedIn connections like Pokemon cards, and started working for his daddy's friends and consulting, I kept my head down. I didn't post much on social media. I didn't go to reunions. I didn't tell anyone outside my mom what I was building. From the outside, I was just the quiet cousin who probably worked in IT or something. Nobody asked. Nobody cared. Behind the scenes, I had been working hard. I taught myself coding in college because I couldn't afford extra classes. I freelanced like my life depended on it. I made connections, launched products, failed, relaunched, failed again, and kept going. I started my own software company at 25, scraped together seed funding by pitching at open mic nights, lived on ramen and grit. And after years of near constant rejection and barely sleeping, I finally hit a break. Then another, and another. It snowballed. By the time I was 32, I had 3 teams across 2 continents, a CTO I trusted like a brother, and a valuation hovering around the $25 million mark. But still, I said nothing to the family. It wasn't about hiding. It was about peace. Except peace was never an option where Brandon was involved. This year, Thanksgiving dinner was at Aunt Linda's McMansion, as always. The same granite countertops, the same meticulously polished silverware, and the same smug smile from Brandon as he leaned against the kitchen island, swirling a glass of overpriced Pinot like he was the host of some reality show about obnoxious relatives. "Oh, hey, Ryan," he said when I walked in, as if I'd wandered in off the street. "You still living in the city? Doing that little tech thing?" I smiled. "Yeah, still at it." "Huh. Good for you, man. Persistence is key. Even if the payout isn't big, at least you're your own boss, right?" I nodded. He smirked. We made small talk. Well, he talked, I listened. About his new Audi, his weekend in the Hamptons, the girl he was dating who modeled part-time, but not like the cheap Instagram kind. I didn't say much. Just let him ramble. He always did enjoy the sound of his own voice. Occasionally, he'd pepper in comments that landed like mosquito bites, annoying, easy to dismiss, but piling up fast. Aunt Linda called everyone to the table. The seating was, as always, suspiciously strategic. Brandon at the head of the table. Aunt Linda to his right. My mom and I tucked off to the side, like ornamental guests. We passed dishes, said grace, made polite conversation. And just as I was reaching for the stuffing, Brandon dropped the first real jab. "So, Ryan," he said, loudly enough that even the cousins down the table paused their conversation. "You ever think about doing something more stable? You know, a real job? Something with benefits?" There was a beat of silence. My mom's fork hovered midair. "I'm doing all right," I said carefully. "I mean, yeah, but you're what, 30-something? No offense, but at some point, the whole startup dream thing becomes a little." He trailed off with a shrug and an apologetic smile. "Just looking out for you, man." Aunt Linda chuckled. "He's always been such a dreamer, our Ryan. But it's good to have passion, even if it doesn't always pan out." The cranberry sauce on my plate looked like blood again. I smiled. "Just barely. Thanks for the concern. But I'm not too worried." Uncle Greg chimed in. "You still living in that old apartment your mom helped you with a few years back?" "She didn't help," I said, sharper than I meant to. "I paid for it myself." He raised his eyebrows, but Brandon jumped in before the tension could settle. "You know what you should do?" he said, eyes lit with fake enthusiasm. "Take some business courses. Get a mentor. I could introduce you to some of my guys from school. They're always looking for assistants or junior developers." "Thanks," I said. But I'm good. That's when he laughed. Actually laughed. Come on, man. Be real. There's no shame in asking for help. We're family. Something in me flickered. Not anger. Not yet. But a kind of awareness. A countdown starting in the back of my mind. He kept talking. About his six-figure bonus, his investment portfolio, the beach house he was looking into for Q1. He dropped terms like assets under management and diversified holdings like they were seasoning for the turkey. And through it all, my mom stayed quiet. She kept eating, kept smiling. I knew what she was thinking. I knew she wanted me to let it go. But something about that night, maybe it was the wine, maybe it was the years of holding my tongue, maybe it was just the sheer arrogance in Brandon's voice, made me pause. Because I had a secret. One I hadn't told any of them. One that would change everything if I dropped it into the middle of that perfectly curated dinner like a grenade. I looked across the table at Brandon, still rambling, still smug. And I smiled. I was done being quiet. But I didn't speak yet. Not just yet. First, I wanted to make sure they were really listening. And the moment came faster than I expected. Brandon always had this way of turning a normal conversation into a performance. Every sentence was a setup, every detail a humble brag, and every compliment a veiled jab. After years of hearing it, you'd think I'd be numb. But that night, it felt different. It wasn't just the way he looked at me, like I was still that scrawny kid eating off the chipped plate at the card table. It was the way everyone else looked at him. Admiring, indulgent, like a favorite pet doing another one of his tricks. He was halfway through a story about some yacht party in Miami, the kind where you don't post pictures, if you know what I mean, when Aunt Linda interrupted. Brandon, sweetie, did you tell them about the Mercedes yet? He smirked, wiped his mouth with his napkin like some twisted royalty, and leaned back in his chair. Oh, right. Yeah, got the AMG last month. It's not even out in the States yet. One of my clients pulled a few strings. Someone down the table whistled. My uncle chuckled. That's my boy, he said, raising his glass. Meanwhile, my mom sat across from me cutting turkey into small, even pieces, like that would keep her hands from shaking. She hated these conversations, especially when they turned into a parade of everything Brandon had that I supposedly didn't. Not that she said anything. She never did. That was her way. Endure with grace. But this wasn't grace. This was something else. This was humiliation wrapped in linen napkins and served with sweet potatoes and smug smiles. So what about you, Ryan? Brandon asked, turning back to me with a theatrical curiosity. Still doing coding stuff? I sipped my water. Still running my company, yeah? Oh, right. He tilted his head. Freelance or product-based. SaaS and API integrations. Scalable platforms. He blinked. Huh. Then he looked around the table like I'd just recited a spell in Latin. Man, you always were the technical one. Aunt Linda gave a polite laugh, as if I'd made a joke. Then the moment I didn't see coming hit like a slap. Actually, she said, turning to my mom with the voice of someone ordering wallpaper samples, Linda Kavanaugh. You remember her, right? Her son works for Amazon now. Full-time. Stock options. You must be so proud, Ryan. My mom looked up, confused. Then she gave a tight-lipped smile. That's nice. But Ryan's doing well on his own. Aunt Linda waved her hand. Oh, of course. It's just nice to see young people find something secure these days. I clenched my jaw. Secure. That word again. Like I was a ticking time bomb of missed opportunities and bad decisions. Like I didn't know what I was doing with my life. Like everything I'd built was just some side project I'd abandoned when I grew up. Brandon took the cue. Actually, Mom, speaking of stability, I've been meaning to ask you something, Ryan. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice dropping to something falsely sincere. You ever think about selling? I know some investors who are scooping up micro companies like yours. You could make, I don't know, 6 figures? Maybe low 7s if you play your cards right. My mom looked at me, concern flickering across her face. I took a deep breath. We passed $20 million in ARR last quarter. Silence. It was the kind of silence that lands hard and shatters into a dozen confused glances. Even the clink of silverware stopped. Brandon blinked. Sorry, what? I looked him dead in the eye. Annual recurring revenue. Over $20 million. We closed a Series B round 6 months ago. Uncle Greg laughed, short and sharp. You're joking. I shook my head. Nope. We're valued just under $25 million right now. Planning a buyout in the next 18 months. Another beat of silence. Aunt Linda looked like someone had slapped her with a cold turkey leg. Brandon's mouth opened, then closed. My mom stared at me with wide eyes. You never told me that. I shrugged. Didn't think anyone wanted to hear about my little tech thing. Brandon scoffed. Come on, man. That's not how valuations work. You'd need, what? Teams, offices, legal, accounting. We have all of that, I said calmly. Outsourced the first few years, then built internal. 3 offices now. Amsterdam, Austin, and Singapore. 48 full-time employees, 39 contractors. He leaned back, his smirk twitching like it wanted to collapse into something less pretty. So you're saying you're sitting on $25 million? I'm saying the company is. I pay myself modestly. Most of it's in equity. Aunt Linda, bless her icy soul, recovered first. Well, she said, reaching for the wine. Isn't that something? But the vibe had changed. You could feel it. Like someone had flipped the power off and now all the glossy facades were dimming. No one really knew what to say. Except Brandon. He stood up, walked around the table, and clapped me on the back like we were frat brothers. Well damn, cousin, he said loudly. Guess I underestimated you. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Guess so. That should have been the end of it. A clean shift. A new dynamic. Maybe even a little respect. But Brandon wasn't built for that. And neither was Aunt Linda. The mood at dinner didn't recover. Dessert was weirdly quiet. Brandon tried to pivot back into familiar territory. You ever meet Elon? You should talk to him. But his voice sounded brittle, like someone trying to keep their footing on a cracked sheet of ice. Aunt Linda, meanwhile, made a point of mentioning that Brandon's new condo had heated marble floors and actual Versace tile in the bathroom, which felt like the verbal equivalent of throwing a glitter bomb and hoping we'd all be impressed. We weren't. As people started to leave, my mom and I helped clear dishes. She didn't say much, just gave me a small nod that meant more than words. But then, as I was bringing in the last tray from the dining room, I heard it. I mean, who hides something like that from their family? Aunt Linda's voice, sharp and whispering through gritted teeth. It's deceptive. Manipulative. He's just trying to show off, Brandon muttered. Probably made half of it up. I paused behind the wall, out of sight. You know he used to copy my homework in middle school? Brandon added. Swear to God, Mom. This guy's a fraud. My hands tightened around the tray. He's always been like this, Aunt Linda replied. Lurking in the background, waiting to make a scene. Look at tonight. Thanksgiving, of all times. And what does he do? Drops a number like that in front of everyone. Everyone. It's tasteless. Unnecessary. And frankly, I don't believe it. A pause. Should have been Brandon, she whispered. He's the one with real connections. That's when I stepped into the room. They froze. Like actors caught out of character. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just looked them both in the eye. I built it from nothing, I said quietly. No trust fund. No connections. No help. And the only reason I never said anything before tonight was because I was trying to protect this. I gestured around the room. This illusion of family. Brandon opened his mouth, but I kept going. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet long enough, you'd stop seeing me as the poor kid in the corner. But now I get it. It was never about me. It was about keeping Brandon on his pedestal. Aunt Linda straightened. Ryan, that's not fair. No, I said. What's not fair is watching my mom sit through 20 years of your condescension. Listening to you mock our clothes, our jobs, our lives, while pretending it's all in good fun. That ends tonight. I turned to go, but then Brandon muttered, still sounds like a fluke. I stopped. Excuse me. He shrugged. Anyone can get lucky. Doesn't make you special. I stared at him. Really stared. And in that moment, I saw it. The crack. The insecurity beneath all the gloss. Because the truth was, he needed to believe it was luck. He had to. Otherwise, he'd have to face what I'd done with nothing while he'd coasted on everything. Tell you what, I said. I'll bring you by the office next week. Maybe seeing it up close will help. He laughed, but it was hollow. I mean it, I said, stepping closer. I'll even let you pitch. We're hiring interns. His smirk vanished. And that's when Uncle Greg walked in, drink in hand, and said, What is going on in here? My mom came in right behind him. Then, as if the universe wanted to etch this moment into family history, Brandon snapped. You know what? I'm out. He stormed out. Actually stormed. Grabbed his coat, slammed the door. Everyone in the living room stared. And Aunt Linda? She turned to my mom and said, This is why we don't mix ambition with insecurity. Then Uncle Greg tossed his drink down, right onto the floor, and muttered, "Unbelievable." Everyone was looking at us now. My mom took my hand, and in that moment, I realized we had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The drive home that night was quiet. Too quiet. Mom didn't say anything at first. She just stared out the window, hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. The only sound was the soft hum of the car and the occasional crunch of leaves under the tires as we turned onto the dark streets leading back to our neighborhood. I wanted to say something. Apologize, maybe. Or explain why I finally said something after all those years of silence. But part of me couldn't tell if she was mad or just tired. Tired of enduring. Tired of holding her breath for 2 decades every time we walked into that McMansion like we didn't belong. Tired of pretending we were just grateful to be included. When we finally pulled into the driveway, she spoke. So softly, I almost missed it. "You didn't have to do that." I turned off the engine. "I know." She looked at me. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were damp. "But I'm glad you did." We sat there for a moment longer. Then she got out and walked into the house, carrying nothing but the pie dish she'd baked earlier that day. Untouched, of course. No one had even looked at it. Not with Aunt Linda's organic, imported, hand-whipped dessert options laid out like a bakery showroom. I followed her inside, closed the door, and stood in the darkened hallway for a second, unsure of what to do with the strange mixture of anger and sadness settling in my chest. It wasn't victory. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was mourning. For what? I wasn't sure. The illusion of family, maybe. The years I spent hoping I'd one day be one of them. I thought success would bridge the gap. Turns out, it just made it wider. The days that followed were tense, but not for the reasons I expected. Brandon didn't reach out. Neither did Aunt Linda. Not even a half-hearted, "let's talk" message or a performative phone call trying to patch things up. Instead, the silence stretched, loud, deliberate, and heavy. Then came the whispers. It started with a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months sending me a screenshot of a group text. One of Brandon's friends had apparently started circulating a story that I'd faked my company's valuation. Another said I'd bought fake followers and bots to inflate my LinkedIn presence. Someone else claimed I was being investigated for fraud, though no one could explain by whom. I laughed at first. I really did, because it was so transparent. But then the rumors started leaking into my professional world. A former colleague emailed me. "Hey, man, someone forwarded me a weird message claiming your company isn't legit. You might want to look into it." An investor pinged me. "Just wanted to confirm. Everything's above board, right? We're hearing some chatter." That's when the laughing stopped. I launched an internal review. Had legal triple-check all our documentation. PR crafted a formal response in case anything hit the media. It didn't, but the effort it took just to stay ahead of a lie was exhausting. I didn't even need evidence to know where it was coming from. The timing, the language, the tone, all of it screamed Brandon. He might not have typed the words himself, but I had no doubt he'd given someone the green light to smear me. Quietly, from the shadows. The thing is, when you grow up around people like Brandon, you learn how they operate. They don't confront. They corrode. Slowly, subtly, just enough to plant doubt. Just enough to make you look unstable or untrustworthy without ever getting their hands dirty. And for a while it worked. We lost a partnership deal. A big one. A client we'd been nurturing for almost a year suddenly went cold. No explanation, no follow-up, just radio silence. That was the moment I cracked. I remember sitting alone in my apartment, my real apartment, the one no one in the family had ever seen, with the city lights glowing through the window and my laptop open, displaying a blank email draft. I stared at it for nearly an hour, thinking, do I go public? Do I call him out? Do I release our financials, show the numbers, name names? But deep down, I knew something else. That's what he'd do. He'd get loud, messy, make it a spectacle. But I wasn't him. I was something else. So I deleted the draft. And I started over. Not the company. We were solid, even with the noise. But me. My mindset. My sense of worth. I took a break from social media. Deleted the LinkedIn app from my phone. I stopped refreshing email like it held the key to my sanity. I went for long walks without my earbuds. Reconnected with old mentors, not to network, but to just talk. I spent more time with my mom. Helped her with her garden. Cooked dinner without checking Slack every 10 minutes. Slowly, I found the version of myself I liked. Not the one chasing approval. Not the one quietly competing with a cousin who never played fair. Just me. I still ran the company, of course. But I stopped letting it define me. I started working on a new product in secret. Something smaller. More personal. A platform to help first-generation entrepreneurs access tools and mentorship without paying thousands for webinars or boot camps. I didn't announce it. I didn't raise money. I just built it. Nights, weekends, between meetings. Quietly. Like planting seeds no one else could see. One day, my mom walked into my home office with 2 mugs of tea and said, "You look lighter." I looked up from my laptop. Lighter? She nodded. Like you're not carrying so much. I thought about it. Maybe I'm just carrying different things now. She smiled. Good. Let Brandon carry the rest. The thing is, I hadn't spoken his name since that night. Neither had she. Not once. It was like we'd both agreed, without saying it, that he no longer had space in our heads. But life, of course, had other plans. A few months later, I got an invitation. A real printed card. Thick stock, embossed letters. Engagement party, Brandon and Alina. Hosted at a private vineyard. Dress code, black tie. I blinked. Alina. That name tugged at something. And then I remembered. She was the girl Brandon had been bragging about last Thanksgiving. The part-time model. Classy, but not stuck up, he'd said. Knows how to be arm candy and hold a conversation. I tossed the invite on my desk and didn't think much of it. Until the second card arrived a few weeks later. We'd love to see you there, cousin. Let's put the past behind us. Brandon. Handwritten. I stared at it for a long time. Because something about the tone felt off. Too eager. Too polished. I checked the return address. It wasn't just a vineyard. It was the same one my company had been scouting for a potential client retreat. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. Coincidence? Maybe. But then I opened my inbox later that day and found a forwarded email. One of my vendors had been contacted by someone claiming to represent me, asking for pricing comparisons and behind-the-scenes details of our event planning process. The name on the email? Brandon Klein. No title. No explanation. Just a name. The vendor hadn't replied. She thought it was strange and wanted to make sure it wasn't me. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't about reconciliation. This wasn't about peace. This was about control. Brandon was trying to fish for intel. To sabotage. Or maybe just to see how far he could push before I pushed back. But he'd made one mistake. He'd invited me into his world. And for the first time, I wasn't walking in as the underdog. I was walking in as the man who'd built an empire while they weren't looking. But I didn't RSVP. Not yet. Because the next move had to be careful. Calculated. Clean. Brandon wanted me in his story. He had no idea I was writing my own. The invite sat on my desk for a full week before I touched it again. I'd left it there on purpose, right next to the prototype sketch for my new startup. One card, thick and glossy, daring me to walk back into the same circle that mocked my ambition for years, now pretending it was water under the bridge. There was no bridge, just wreckage. And Brandon was acting like he hadn't spent the last few months lighting matches behind my back. But I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the wild, hot way that makes you want to punch a wall or scream into your steering wheel. No, this was colder. Focused. Like a lens snapping into place. Brandon had just handed me something he didn't realize had value. An opening. And if I played this right, I wasn't just going to get closure. I was going to rewrite the family script. Mom was hesitant, of course. When I casually mentioned I might show up to the engagement party, she put down her tea mid-sip and said, "Why would you want to go back into that circus?" "I'm not going back," I said. "I'm walking in." She narrowed her eyes. "And doing what exactly?" "Watching," I said. "Listening. Gathering data." She gave me that look she used to give when I tried to convince her I wasn't sneaking snacks past bedtime. But she didn't press. She knew me well enough to know when something was brewing. And something was. See, Brandon had always underestimated me. That was his fatal flaw. He thought I was some scrappy coder who got lucky. He didn't know the version of me that had spent years negotiating contracts with multi-million-dollar companies, handling due diligence with sharks in suits, or pulling 18-hour days to patch a critical exploit minutes before a global rollout. He'd never seen that side of me, because I never let him. Until now. The first thing I did was research the venue. The vineyard was high-end, no doubt, but not some untouchable celebrity estate. It was a prestige brand masquerading as exclusive, but it had chinks in the armor. I knew the event manager through an old college friend, someone I'd helped build a restaurant POS system years ago, back when I was taking freelance gigs just to cover rent. One phone call later, I had eyes on the guest list, floor plans, catering schedule, and, most importantly, the AV setup. I told her I was scouting the location for a tech retreat and asked if she had security protocols in place for private corporate launches. She sent me a full brochure. Brandon had no idea. Then came phase 2, rewriting the narrative. I knew that in Brandon's mind, I was still the outsider, the tech cousin who got lucky and overreacted at Thanksgiving, which meant his version of the story, the one he'd probably been spoon-feeding to relatives over wine and cheese, painted him as the gracious host trying to make peace. I needed to flip that, but not by confronting him. No, that would only feed his drama addiction. Instead, I started showing up in small ways where he'd least expect it. A panel on digital entrepreneurship at a university alumni event, one where he was scheduled to attend, not speak. I got myself invited last minute. Gave a keynote. Didn't say a word to him. Just let my name echo through the room while people took selfies and asked for advice. An op-ed I published in a major tech outlet, discussing quiet success and the value of building without validation. A subtle nod to family dynamics, gatekeeping, and resilience. It went semi-viral. A few of my extended relatives even shared it on Facebook with comments like, "So proud of our Ryan," clearly unaware of the veiled subtext. Then came the tech podcast. A rising creator asked me to do a deep dive on bootstrapping to millions. I agreed. I told my story, left out the names, but laced every anecdote with enough detail that anyone who knew the family would recognize who I meant. You ever get invited to a dinner where everyone's eating gold-plated steak and you brought lasagna in a Tupperware? I joked at one point. Yeah, that's when I knew I had to build my own table. The clip blew up. Brandon didn't reach out, but I knew he saw it. He was too vain not to be watching. By the time the party was a week away, the pieces were moving. My legal team had finalized the paperwork on my new startup. The mentorship platform, codenamed North Node, was ready for soft launch. We'd onboard 50 users from underserved communities, with free access to tools that cost hundreds elsewhere. I didn't need to profit off of it. It was built for impact, and it was personal, because deep down, I'd always wanted to create the thing I never had. A path for the kids who weren't born with the Brandon starter pack. But the true masterstroke came when I looped in my old friend Milo. Milo had been my first real business partner back when I was still figuring out how invoices worked. He was loud, charismatic, and ran a boutique PR firm now. He owed me a favor from way back, something about helping him out of a disastrous crypto sponsorship. "Whatever you need," he told me over the phone. "You want me to crash the party dressed like a magician? Fake a scandal? Nothing that messy." I laughed. "Just need a spotlight." I gave him the details. The date, the time, the guest list, and one very specific name. Brandon's boss. Turns out, Brandon wasn't as entrepreneurial as he liked to claim. He'd spun his current role into something more impressive than it was, strategic consultant, whatever that meant. But according to Milo's background team, he was clinging to a job at a mid-sized firm trying to break into AI. And the CEO of that firm? Milo had worked with him on a failed app launch a year prior. "Bring him as a +1, I said. "Done," Milo said. "You're sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure." That Friday, I got the final confirmation I'd been waiting for. The vineyard was ready. Brandon's team had requested extra AV equipment for a presentation segment. I knew what that meant. A slideshow. Probably pictures of him and Alina looking perfect. Maybe a toast. Maybe a career brag. A chance to impress. And a chance to hijack. But not with chaos. With clarity. I had one more call to make. "Hey man," I said, dialing an old contact from my accelerator days. "You still have access to those portable mini projectors? The discreet kind?" "Sure do," he replied. "Got an event?" Something like that. Saturday arrived like a slow drum roll. I wore a tailored charcoal suit. Clean, minimal, sharp. No flashy watch. No designer label screaming for attention. Just confidence. The kind that doesn't need permission to walk into a room. When I arrived, the venue was buzzing. Champagne flutes clinked under golden chandeliers strung between vineyard trellises. Guests milled around in curated semi-casual elegance, all laughing a bit too loudly and hugging like they'd just closed million-dollar deals. Brandon was at the center of it all. Of course. Tan. Grinning. arm draped around Alina like a human trophy case. He spotted me within seconds. His face twitched, but only for a moment. Then he walked over, smiling. "Ryan," he said, voice just loud enough for the nearest cluster to hear. "Didn't think you'd show. Just here to celebrate," I said, matching his tone. "Appreciate it," he replied, leaning in. "Guess you finally figured out how to wear real suits, huh?" I smiled. "Guess you finally figured out how to invite people." He flinched, just barely, then walked away. For the next hour, I mingled. Polite, distant, watching, waiting. At 8:20 p.m., the lights dimmed. Brandon took the mic. "Thanks everyone for being here," he said. "Tonight's not just about love. It's about legacy." I almost choked on my drink. He went on about hard work, vision, sacrifice. About how building something real takes guts. About how he and Alina were planning a new venture, real estate tech, of all things, and how they were always looking for strategic partners. Then came the slideshow. Photos, logos, fancy terms that didn't mean anything. One slide even showed a mock-up of a platform that looked suspiciously like North Node. I stared at it, and I knew. He'd stolen it. Or tried to. The code was different. The branding was off. But the flow, the layout, the purpose, it was mine. The vendor I'd caught snooping weeks ago must have leaked enough for Brandon to fake a pitch deck. I should have been furious. But instead, I felt calm. Because this was perfect. He was about to fly too close to the sun, and I was holding the matches. The room went dark again as Brandon transitioned to the final slide, a dramatic mock-up of his new platform. A logo flickered on screen, a clunky, half-baked design that looked like it had been thrown together by someone who thought Canva made you a designer. The tagline underneath read, "Empowering young visionaries. Unlocking potential. The future is now." I almost laughed. Not because of the message, but because the layout, the structure, the whole thing, was ripped from an internal North Node pitch deck I'd shared with exactly 3 people in a password-protected folder. So that confirmed it. Brandon wasn't just posturing anymore. He was stealing. And now, he was doing it on a projector screen in front of 100 guests, at a vineyard filled with local influencers, tech investors, and a CEO who already thought Brandon was a fraud. The same CEO who was, at that very moment, standing at the back of the room with Milo, whispering something and shaking his head slowly. Brandon was still speaking. "I've always believed in leading with vision, with purpose. And when Alina and I sat down to sketch out this idea, we knew we were onto something big, something that could change the world." I reached into my jacket pocket and clicked the button on the remote I'd synced to the venue's secondary projector, the one my contact had discreetly connected earlier that day behind the main display. The screen behind Brandon suddenly went black. He paused, confused. Then, a new slide popped up. Pure white background. One sentence in bold, black font. "This is what real vision looks like." Gasps. Murmurs. A few laughs. Brandon turned around. "What the?" Before he could finish, the screen changed again. Slide 1. A time-stamped email chain from my inbox with subject line, "North Node prototype access. Confidential." Slide 2. The original North Node dashboard design, side by side with the one Brandon had just shown. Slide 3. A highlighted paragraph from a non-disclosure agreement with a vendor who'd leaked information, signed by someone named C. Danner, Brandon's college roommate. Slide 4. A list of known IP addresses that had accessed our development portal without permission. One of them matched the Wi-Fi network named BrandonHomeNet_5G. And then, Slide 5. A video clip of me, taken just 2 weeks earlier during an early North Node onboarding session. In the clip, I'm saying, we don't just build tools. We build ladders for kids who've been told they're not allowed to climb. Silence. Real, echoing silence. Brandon was frozen, his mouth slightly open, eyes wide, still holding the mic like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Then Milo stepped forward. Loud, confident, charismatic. "Folks," he said, grinning. "Sorry for the surprise presentation, but we figured you deserved to see the real future." He gestured to me. "This is Ryan Klein, founder and CEO of North Node. His platform's already helping young entrepreneurs across 3 continents. No fake decks, no stolen designs, just impact. Real, measurable impact." I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just met Brandon's gaze across the room. He tried to speak. "Wait, this isn't." But no one was listening. Because now people were whispering, pointing, pulling out their phones. Then came the voice that sealed it all. Brandon's boss. He stepped forward slowly, holding a glass of red wine like he was about to perform a toast. I had my doubts, he said, voice smooth but stern. But this is something else. Brandon turned toward him, pleading. Sir, I didn't know. Someone must have sent that deck. I thought it was a reference. The CEO held up a hand. Don't. Just don't. He turned to Milo. Can I speak to you and Mr. Klein outside? Milo winked. Of course. As the three of us walked past Brandon, I paused. By the way, I said quietly, leaning in so only he could hear, you should probably stop using public Wi-Fi to steal code. He stared at me, stunned. I didn't wait for a response. Outside, under the vineyard's canopy lights, the air smelled like grapes and gasoline. The CEO shook my hand. Hell of a move in there. I shrugged. Just tired of being polite. I respect that. He pulled out a business card. If you're ever looking for acquisition partners, real ones, give me a call. I nodded. I'll think about it. Milo chuckled. That went better than planned. I'm not done, I said, because the real fallout hadn't even started. By the next morning, the video of the vineyard incident was circulating on Instagram stories and Twitter. Someone had recorded the moment the screen switched. Another had zoomed in on Brandon's face when the slide about the IP address showed up. A tech blog picked it up by noon. By Sunday, Brandon's LinkedIn profile was deactivated. By Monday, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was cautious. Ryan, did you really need to go that far? I took a breath. Maybe not. But he wasn't going to stop, Mom. Not until he broke something I built. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, you didn't break him. He did that to himself. And she was right. Brandon didn't just lose a job or a reputation. He lost the one thing he built his identity around, the illusion of success, the curated persona, the constant performance. And without it, he was just a guy in a suit with nothing to say. 3 weeks later, I launched North Node officially. We got press. Investors reached out. I declined most of them. I wanted to keep it clean. I wanted to keep it mine. Mom came to the launch, wore her best coat, cried when she saw the first mentorship circle form around a group of teenagers from low-income schools. This is what you've been doing all these nights, she asked, wiping her eyes. Yeah, I said. This is what I've been building while they weren't watching. I never saw Brandon again after the party. But I heard he tried to apply for a job at a startup accelerator a few towns over. Didn't get it. Apparently, one of the interviewers had been at the vineyard that night. Small world. Funny how that works. You grow up thinking the best revenge is proving them wrong. But it's not. The best revenge is proving yourself right and letting them choke on the silence that follows. Because I didn't just build a business. I built a legacy, one they'll never be able to copy.